What's a thing that a teenager can do now to help them out once they turn 18? The sooner you get a good routine, the better. So I'd say learn to take care of your teeth and don't forget to floss. It's easy to look over flossing and not do it, but it's so important and future you will thank you. Traffic rules. Please take them the frick seriously. Most of us drive like idiots until our first major accident, and you'd better pray it's not curtains for you when that happens. Don't drive like a 12-year-old playing GTA 5, don't drive if you're drinking, and wear your fricking seatbelt. Wear it. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, but don't risk mistakes that will severely compromise the rest of your life. What I see across cultures and countries is an enormous pressure to be perfect, so high that nobody can possibly ever meet the pressure. So people make mistakes, as they should, but the problem is that the pressure to be perfect makes all mistakes seem the same. Risk losing some money, risk making relationship mistakes, risk losing friends, risk losing a year. Those things are fine. Don't risk 6 figures of debt, which means students without a degree or a good major or a good GPA to show for it. College is a great investment if you also put the time and effort in to succeed. You shouldn't risk disease, don't risk death, don't risk pregnancy, don't risk substance addiction. Do not risk a felony conviction. Take the kinds of risks your 25-year-old self will laugh about. Don't take the kind of risks your 25-year-old self will curse you for saddling them with. Be social, but remember friends will come and go. Don't invest in people that won't invest in you. Get ready for your friend circle to shrink by half or more. And that's okay because your adult friends will hopefully be much healthier and happier for you than your teenage friends. Smoking. I started with cigs so that I could take breaks from work in construction. I'm 27 now and I can't quit vaping. This sucks. Honestly, Color the Narrator surprised that people in 2018 were getting onto cigarettes rather than straight up starting with vapes in the first place. Kind of thought society shifted off the old tobacco. Then again, it is a massive industry and it's probably pulled literally every stunt possible to keep its manipulative, financially bloated, and exploitative self going by any means necessary. Learn some basic cooking. Learn how to wash clothes, hang them up, do ironing. You might be moving out soon, so practice the skills you'll need. Imagine all of the things you'd have to do if mum and dad weren't around, and start practicing them. Draw up a budget, look at how much to rent in the place you want to live, add in food and electricity and mobile phone and internet. Don't forget to add bond too. Taxes. How to vote, how to write emails. I've had to teach several first years at my university how to do these. I get a lot of emails from customers at work. Trust me, plenty of people well over 30 don't know how to write emails. Some email tips off the top of my head. First, tone. Be polite, use proper grammar, sentence structure, and capitalization. Word choice. I sometimes get emails that use slang terms or acronyms that I've never heard of, and I have to look up. Industry-specific terminology and acronyms are fine though, as long as the audience for your email would reasonably be aware of them. Formatting. Effectively using bullet points, bolds or italics, hyperlinks. Those things can improve email communication by a lot. And questions. If possible, try to keep emails to a single question. That's not always possible, but if you have an important question that you need answered in an hour, and a trivial question that doesn't have a deadline, it's better to ask the first question and save the trivial one for another time. If there are 3 questions buried in 6 or 7 paragraphs, I'm more likely to miss them than if you ask them at the same time in a numbered list at the bottom. Some people prefer to ask their questions in line and just bold them. Not my preference, but it's much better than a hidden question mark. Oh, and use question marks when you ask a question. Listen to your desires and dreams. I'm 28. My goals and dreams now are vastly different than when I was 18. Listen to those changes. For a long time, I kept chasing a dream almost because I felt I owed it to my younger self. It's okay for your dreams to age as you age and your circumstances change. Who you are now will not be the same person you are at 23. And as you grow, listen to your internal monologue. Dreams and desires change. Grow with them. Piggybacking off of this, make sure there are some hobbies you really enjoy, and preferably some which you can do alone or at home. Don't rely on other people for entertainment. Taking care of your physical and mental health before you fall into the trap of, "Oh, I don't have time for that." Really sit down and think about how you can better yourself for your own sake. Authorized user is a sort of cheat code in the credit world. If your parents have decent credit and take care of that crap, see if they make you an AU on a card and then lock the card up in a box. Being AU makes the credit history of the account show up on your credit report. If financial responsibility is a big deal in your house, this can have some major advantages when you're trying to get started. Yep, it's totally a cheat code, but it does work. I'm 30 and my credit history is 22 years according to my credit report. I remember my mom telling me that she was going to do this, but I didn't really understand what it meant. Thanks, Mom. Don't ask your parents to do this if they have bad credit, though. That'll just weigh you down. Remember that at 18, you're now risking real jail time. Relationships. As soon as you hit 18, things start becoming real. Don't get married without being sure of your future spouse. Don't go unprotected doing the deed. Don't get into a relationship where your other half will get you in trouble with the law. Your data trail online. Old Instagram and Facebook posts can come back and haunt you during future interviews. Do a spring clean and nuke everything. In some jurisdictions, Europe, maybe California, you can have things purged under privacy laws. Learn how to take care of yourself. Take full responsibility for everything that's happening in your life. Create big goals and have a life purpose if you have one. Focus on saving money and don't buy stupid crap to impress people who you don't even like. A big thing you should learn, along with having goals and a purpose, is to be flexible. Stuff happens sometimes and you've got to know it's okay for plans to change. I'm 17 and I'll be turning 18 later this year, so I look forward to reading these responses. Don't be afraid to walk away from a job or person that's toxic. Start saving now so that you can walk away. Community college is your best friend. Go there before doing the last 2 years at 4th year. Trade schools are just as viable. There's no shame in being debt-free at 22 making $60K. And 3 to 5% of all income should go to retirement starting now. Go open a Roth 401k. Getting your crap together. 18 is not the age you should be thinking you're a full-blown adult. No, you need to go venture into the 20s for that. But between 18 and 21, you just gotta get your crap together. No matter what it is. Financial, mental, physical, just do whatever it takes to make sure you can fully prosper from stressed-out teen to battle-hardened grown-up. I was gonna say something along those lines, like work on being self-aware or self-reflection. As ashamed as I am to admit it, I was very resentful when I joined the adult working world. Everything that wasn't going right for me was because of external factors holding me back. That was simply not true, or at least it was exaggerated. That mindset gets you nowhere quickly. I'd say that a lot of these really good suggestions other people have on here could be solved by starting with someone who developed a good self-awareness of how they're acting or thinking about stuff coming up in their life. 18-year-olds will get that brutal dose of reality sooner or later. What's critical is how they react to that initial challenge. If you can avoid passing the blame, regardless of whether it's within your control or not, it will begin a slow trend towards taking ownership of all aspects of your life. Develop healthy habits now. Proper nutrition, a steady sleep schedule, regular exercise, stuff like that. You are in a fantastic position to build a healthy lifestyle that will elevate your quality of life for the rest of it. It is much, much harder to change existing unhealthy habits that have been established for years. Most people aren't able to. Give yourself the best chance for a lifetime of health and happiness now. The first few years of your early 20s will fly, and then one day you'll wake up and be like, I'm 25? I'm halfway to 50. Oh boy, the narrator remembers his quarter-life crisis, sitting in a bar with friends and a 1,000-yard stare a few days before I turned 25. And then I kept on behaving like a teenager for another few years, so honestly, maybe my crisis should have shaken me more to make me get my act together. Learn how to learn. Most of us had no idea how to do taxes, get a mortgage, vote, fix a broken electrical socket. You just need to know where to go to learn things, and I think the younger generations are already exceptional at finding information. But there's a sort of learned helplessness some people have, especially those who didn't have to learn things while they lived at home, where if something seems confusing or hard, they just give up versus actually searching out more information. Sometimes YouTube is great. Sometimes you need to call an expert, and sometimes you need to take a class. For example, check Reddit personalfinance to see how many people post about not understanding their car loans or mortgages, or just give up on filing their taxes for years because, quote, it's hard. Just learn about things before you jump in. Your mental health. Don't set so many goals for yourself that the stress makes your mental health suffer. Take some time for yourself. Do nothing with it, just recharge, even if it's only a couple of hours a week. It gives you something to look forward to. Also, learn how to budget and save. Credit cards. Networking for job prospects. Seriously, just getting out and building a social network can help so much, especially if you're networking in the same field as you're going into. Read every document that you sign. You're now accountable for everything you put your name to. Careers that have lasting happiness, financial stability, and ways to move around in a field to prevent or in case of burnout. Not cooking is what I'm trying to say. Time management, finances, foregoing college, and working for a few years. They should really begin to try and understand why they're doing the things they're doing. Are you going to college because that's what your teachers and parents are saying you should do? Is it a practical choice? College can be good, but a lot of jobs you could have gotten with a degree, you can get without one. You may just end up robbing your future self for a delayed adolescence. If you're plagued with debt and existential dread, please consider these at the bare minimum. Clean your teeth twice a day with a soft or extra soft brush, and fluoride toothpaste. Hard brushes are inefficient in cleaning small crevices and are prone to sanding away your enamel. Floss as well. Apply physical sunscreens containing titanium or zinc oxide for any amount of sun exposure. Chemical sunscreens are effective, but they'll cause tanning and pose a higher risk of free radical damage. Keep hydrated by leaving full water bottles around your desk or workspace. Turn it into a routine rather than an exception. Incorporate legumes, whole grains, and vegetables into your diet. Otherwise, the constipation will force you to spend more time on the loo and lend a higher risk of backside prolapse, hemorrhaging, or other declines in the quality of your life. And get those Zeds in, bro. Chronic sleep deprivation will shorten your life expectancy and predispose you to depression and anxiety. And hug your heckin' pet for that free oxytocin. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I'd say, personally, student loans. Don't major in a field where your student loans will equal twice as much as your starting salary. Medical and law may be exempt. And to add some more general advice, don't believe bullcrap about lucrative fields and careers of the future or stuff like that. Hard subject does not equal good-paying job, especially STEM field. I know people with degrees in chemistry, physics, and genetics, and they're either barely getting by or they've switched careers to IT or finance with flavors of IT. Also, if you want to work in quantitative finance, be one of those quants. Don't get a degree in finance. Get a degree in math or physics and learn to code. Those fields almost exclusively hire people with STEM degrees with a large math component, so no biochemistry or genetics like me. Interestingly, some people with a history of arts degrees also end up in IT. And if your parents tell you astrophysics is not a good field, tell them to get effed. It's the best way to get into a lucrative quant job. Roth IRA, and contribute to your 401k if your job has one. Many employers match up to a certain amount. Does your job offer a pension? Pretend that pension doesn't exist, because a frighteningly large amount of them are underfunded. Start an IRA instead. Getting a job and a driver's license if you don't have one already. Surely when you're just turning 18, it'll be cheaper and easier to rely on public transport, at least for uni years. Oh, alright, I get it. America doesn't have public transport. Being a YouTuber is not a career, and it's not for everyone. It should be a hobby well before it can be considered a career. It's very rare that you reach a level of success where that's an option. Decide if college is actually for you. There are many jobs that are going to be automated in your lifetime. Jobs that will be the last to automate are labor jobs. Start a landscaping company, a pool cleaning company, a plumbing company, or like an AC or heater repair thing. Any kind of labor-type job. If you start young, you could have the potential to make $60K a year after only a couple of years without putting yourself into $40+ K in debt. Obviously, this route isn't for everyone, but don't sleep on it just because everyone up until this point has said you need to go to college. Politics. You're old enough to vote. Currently, the 65+ crowd dominates elections. They'll be dead soon. There are more of you than there are of them. It's your future. Don't buy into the turd sandwich versus giant D-bag apathy. Select the politicians you agree with. And pay attention to the local elections as much, if not more, than the national stage, especially in America. There's some sneaky, messed up crap that happens locally that will impact your life in ways that you just don't anticipate. Yep. Pay attention, look at the arguments from both sides of the divide, and look at specifically who has a road plan for your best interests at heart, and isn't just saying that they'll magically make things better. And look at who's the least in pocket of billionaires and foreign powers. Literally everything that happened to you in high school doesn't matter. Like, sure, you've heard and likely dismissed that while you were going through it, but the sooner you accept it, the faster you'll start to act like an adult. Also, if you're a dude, 23 seems to be the year that everything goes to heck. But keep on and stuff will improve. I don't think this is good advice. You can get someone pregnant or you can get pregnant in high school. You can commit felonies where you'll be tried as an adult in high school. You'll get crappy grades that ruin your chance at finding good colleges and scholarships in high school. You can miss class so much that you have to retake a year. You can end up with a bad job reference in high school. There are all sorts of things you can do to ruin your life in high school. Learn how to use Excel or Google Sheets and make a budget. Live by it. Get a bank account. Get checks. Budget will help here for people who don't cash checks timely. Whatever extra money you have, if you do, divide it by 2. Save half and enjoy the other half. That will keep you from feeling burned out. Start saving money every paycheck. Learn how to frickin' cook. I know it's way more convenient to throw things in the microwave, but trust me. For your sanity, take a quality over quantity approach when it comes to feeding yourself. It's healthier and cheaper if you do it right at the cost of some time. And if you learn your way around spices and flavors, you'll be able to make restaurant-quality meals while wearing literally nothing but a bathrobe. If you smoke, stop now. Oh, thanks, I'm cured. That was so easy. Screw you, idiot. I'm turning 18 next month. I can 100% confirm that the class of 2020 all the way to at least class of 2026 is absolutely fricked from vaping. They will not stop. Since everyone's saying the obvious, I'll say an underrated thing. You need to focus on you. Try avoiding acne, getting fat, and finding your hair and fashion style. I mean, the first 2 things have a massive genetic component, but thanks anyway, I guess. Your social media profiles. More and more good-paying jobs are conditional upon a background check that involves social media research. More and more companies want to know who you are as a person to make sure you'll be a good personality fit for the company. Skills are only part of the picture. To better gauge this, invasive social media screening is done. The separation between personal life and professional life is quickly being eroded. Teachers get fired for their social media posts. You could be one party picture away from losing a $75K a year job to somebody else, even if that picture was taken a long time ago. Like you could be 22, graduating college, and a background check found something you posted 4 years ago that's being used against you. So start being careful about what you post online now, because in the future it might bite you in the butt real hard and you might not even realize it. You kids should be focusing on politics because it will affect your lives more. Yes. Register to vote, learn about and engage in more than just presidential elections. One of the best things young adults can start to do is solidifying their values and distinguishing from their parents. So many young people are just an extension of their parents' beliefs. Learn for yourselves. This is one I'm not seeing a lot. Learn to talk. 20-year-old here. So many kids nowadays are so locked into their tech that they simply don't have proper communication skills or don't know how to act in a social setting. Practice conversing. Be comfortable talking to people. It will only benefit you tremendously. Even if you're an introvert, you should at least be able to hold on to like half of a conversation where it seems like you're engaged and committed. I can't tell you the amount of times I've gotten internships, bonuses, and the like, just because I knew how to have a human-to-human conversation. So many times at my age, going into interviews and stuff, just conversing with other candidates, it's shocking how little interactive social skills they actually have, because all they do is bury their heads into their phones with their wireless earbuds in, completely ignoring objective reality. Talk! Who's bullcrapping you? Who out there really has your back and is a straight shooter? When are you just getting a sales pitch? Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with being sold to, but know how to recognize when you're just buying hype and buzzwords. Take note of what you consider a joke. I've noticed on Reddit it's common for people to say over and over again, "It's just a joke," or "It's just a meme, don't take it so seriously." But at the same time, why is it so many people here find jokes and memes about other people ending their existences, depression, low self-esteem, loneliness, mental instability, financial ruin, existential dread, and debt? So funny. Masking your insecurities in humor doesn't help you in the long run. Misery loves company. As you start out on your own, it's important to start saving as much money as you can and delay gratification. Don't just live paycheck to paycheck and buy every shiny bauble that you can. A rainy day fund is important, because sooner or later, it rains. Plus, you'll get older eventually and want to do things like buy a house or start a family. Hand washing. I feel like not enough kids are learning how to cook anymore. Chillingly accurate. This is especially frustrating when you consider the fact that finding a recipe is as simple as watching a YouTube video. That is interesting, isn't it? Unlike our folks, we really have the knowledge of how to cook anything we want at our fingertips. Maybe that's why we don't practice or write down recipes. And yet, even my older millennial generation feels like both guys and girls have a certain lack of any culinary skills, even up to their late 20s. Honestly, being able to do some basic stuff in the kitchen seems to impress some of my peers way more than it should. That 14-day free trial is coming to an end. Depends on the person, but responsibility over stuff and realizing this is the real world. If you're going into college and you're going to have to take out student loans, you have to think about your degree as an investment. This means you have to realistically evaluate the earning potential of your degree compared to how much in loans you're taking out. A classic example, a psychology bachelor's degree is infamous for being somewhat worthless in terms of earning potential on its own. In order to make money in psychology, you have to get a PhD as well. So if you take out $100K in loans for a psychology bachelor's degree by itself, that's not a good idea. My generation, I'm 36, grew up being told we could be whatever we wanted and to follow our dreams. Unfortunately, you have to be more grounded in reality than that. Don't go to college just because it's the default. Choose the best plan of action for your goals. Start putting a little money aside every week right now. How to do your taxes. I don't know why things like that aren't taught at school. The tax system, in the US anyways, is pretty damn complex. It's because it changes slightly every year. And it's because the schools don't want the liability. Finances. Just put 20% away. Pretend it doesn't exist. You need more money? Tough it out until you find a better job or get a raise. Sunscreen, moisturizer, investing, and mental health and mindfulness. Watch Graham Stephen on YouTube. He's a great financial YouTuber that gives good advice and he's not condescending about it either. Retirement accounts. Throw crumbs into them during your 20s and compound interest will do its magic, giving you a very comfortable retirement.
Doctors of Reddit, what are some of your anti-vax parent stories? Had a kid come in for generic upper respiratory virus, asked mom if he was vaccinated as is routine, and she said no. When I asked why not, her response was, "Well, my boyfriend was vaccinated and he still got meningitis, so they don't even work." I told her that's the same as saying your friend got bruised by a seatbelt in a car accident, so you don't wear them when you drive. We had a 14-year-old female come in for abdominal pain one time. She weighed around 80 pounds, looked sickly, and her mother refused to let her eat anything but a handful of things, and nothing with very much protein at all. She literally had a binder full of articles about how horrible vaccines are, all the bad things they put in food these days, etc. She completely brainwashed this kid, so the kid believed it too. Her labs showed malnutrition, her teeth were horrible. It was just a sad case all around. Not a doctor, but a story I heard stuck with me. The head of pediatrics from a Toronto hospital, I forgot which one, was giving a talk and told a story about how early in her practice, she had a little boy in for his scheduled vaccines and was answering the nervous mother's questions. The mother planned to go ahead with the vaccines, but had heard a lot of anti-vax propaganda, and so she was worried and had lots of questions. While they were talking, but before they administered the vaccines, this poor little kid suffered a grand mal seizure. It was really bad. The kid ended up getting admitted to the hospital and suffered a fairly serious brain injury. It occurred to the pediatrician much later that if that seizure had hit 10 minutes later, or if the appointment had been 10 minutes earlier, nothing would have ever convinced that poor mother that it wasn't the vaccine that caused the seizure. Had a 5 or 6 year old patient who had a super hippie mom. No reason for not vaccinating other than she doesn't want to, despite counseling many times. The kid also had asthma and would consistently come in for exacerbations despite prescribing appropriate controller meds. The amount of exacerbations just didn't make sense. One day, I sent my student to see him first while I called the pharmacy to see if his meds were received. The student came back saying, "I can't get a history from mom. She's literally falling asleep while talking to me." Also, pharmacy said the meds haven't been picked up from the last 3 visits. That was enough for me to call CPS. Mom was on drugs. Living situation? Deplorable. Last I heard, kid was moved to an aunt who caught him up with age-appropriate vaccines. When I was a med student, I had a parent who wanted to do a delayed vaccination schedule. Basically, it means that you get all the same vaccinations, but you pointlessly and foolishly do it over a longer period of time. The mom had read a book promoting this practice that was unfortunately written by an MD. My pediatric attending had zero chill. Is that book written by Dr. Blank? Yes. Well, you should know I was in the same medical school as Dr. Blank, but I got much better scores than he did. Not a doctor, but my significant other works with children who have autism. She has one parent that constantly tells her she regrets vaccinating her kid. She then asks questions to my significant other about which vaccines are the ones that cause autism, as if it's a big secret. My significant other tells her that autism is predetermined before birth and signs just aren't noticeable until around 2 years of age. She still tries to justify her logic with other anti-vax parent stories from Facebook. My significant other has 2 master's degrees towards this field. It blows my mind how they can still argue with overwhelming facts. Nearly qualified pharmacist here, so obligatory, not a doctor. Our pharmacy offers travel vaccines for people going away to countries with a high likelihood of severe tropical disease. Star parenting goes to the parents who got themselves vaccinated for rabies, but not their 2 elementary school-age children. This one just makes no sense to me. You obviously understand the dangers, but don't want to protect your children? In medical school, I saw a kiddo whose parents refused vaccines, and so they were given the vaccine refusal form to sign. This form essentially said that the parents understood that refusing vaccines was against medical advice, that their kiddo could get sick from all those preventable diseases, and that they wouldn't hold the doctor or practice liable for any complications that the kiddo may get from said preventable diseases. This mom pulled out a Sharpie and blacked out the part about the doctor not being liable. The parents thought we'd be cool with them just changing the form just for them, and they wanted the doctor to be held liable for their moronic choice. Of course this didn't work, and they were told to sign the form or they would be discharged from the practice and have to find another. They refused to sign and were told to leave after given a list of other pediatricians in the area. These folks are delusional, thinking you can just alter a legal form like that with a Sharpie. Some people blow my mind. Med school student here. I was getting my hair cut and I was talking to the barber about how more people should get the new meningitis B vaccine since I know a person who got meningitis B and almost died. The desk lady went off about how vaccines are dangerous and pretty much hit every single anti-vax talking point. I explained the actual facts behind vaccines and said that I'm studying medicine. I think I might know what I'm talking about. And then she went off about professors not knowing what they're talking about and that they just teach what they're told to teach so that we can all be brainwashed into supporting the big pharmaceutical companies, and that my proof was all fabricated by them. Not a doctor, but a nurse and a vaccine advocate. Once had a public argument with a friend from long ago. He argued that by not vaccinating his kids and risking terrible side effects and possible autism, he was placing no one else at risk. However, acknowledging the potential risk to his kids. After attempting to explain the potential risk to others and him failing to understand, I created an analogy which I still use to this day. Imagine if my kids and your kids get into the same car. Both of your kids don't put on seatbelts. Therefore, if there's an accident, there's an increased risk that your kids will die and also harm my children in the process. This seemed to click with him, and he doesn't share his anti-vax propaganda on social media anymore. Thank you. We have someone who can be spoken to and understand the facts and can change their way of thinking. We actually found an adult. Not directly related to my being a doctor, but a mutual friend of mine and my wife's is a chiropractor and anti-vaxxer. Refused to vaccinate her first 2 kids. I didn't want her or her kids coming anywhere near our place when we had newborns or kids because of the risk her unvaccinated kids placed on my partially vaccinated babies. She got all offended, saying the usual rubbish like, "If vaccines work, what do your kids have to fear?" And "Your kids are more risk to mine because they'll be shedding viruses." Her 3rd child was born with cystic fibrosis, which makes them very susceptible to all forms of respiratory and airborne infectious diseases. Suddenly, the whole hypocritical family is vaccinated against everything. Not a doctor, but I worked at a children's hospital in research, at the time as a coordinator. A bunch of us were sitting in our office space talking about medical care of some sort casually. I think maybe flu vaccines, and one coordinator cuts in. Well, I don't know if you've seen the recent research, but there are a number of issues with vaccines that make them unsafe. They're highly correlated with autism. The room got quiet because everyone was polite. One person said, "Oh, I had heard that," I think in an effort to not alienate the girl. I responded, "That's not true," because I couldn't not say that. She said, "Yeah, I'll send you the link." I said, "I think I've probably read the study. It's been rescinded." Then it got more awkward. This was probably in 2017. I just couldn't believe that in 2017, a person whose job it is to understand research at a hospital with children can fall victim to bad research that has not been supported by any reputable source since probably the 90s. I'm not a medical doctor, but a mental health therapist. Went to do a new client intake, and while asking the mother about the kid's medical history, vaccination records, etc., she said he wasn't vaccinated because vaccines cause autism and she didn't want to risk her son getting it. Then when I meet the kid, within 5 seconds of laying eyes on him, I could tell he was autistic. Worst part was that when I told her, she became very upset and started yelling at her husband saying he must have gotten the kid secretly vaccinated, and then immediately ran out of the house and took the kid to the emergency room for testing and just left me and the dad in the living room just kind of staring at each other. Never answered my calls or texts again after that, and I had to get DCF involved. I was a medical student when this happened. My attending pediatrician gave me a heads up about the parent I was about to see and decided it would be best if he came into the room with me. 4-year-old kid came in with a horrible cough and difficulty breathing. It was almost surely pertussis, aka whooping cough. The kid was coughing so bad he vomited on the exam table. He went on to ask about vaccinating her kid, and of course she replied no, even though her son was damn near coughing up his lung right next to her. I think my attending had seen enough and had enough of her not vaccinating her kid and had the following conversation with the kid's mom. Attending: "Miss Blank, I have to ask you, do you trust me as your son's doctor?" Mom: "Of course I do." Attending: "Well, there's 2 problems here that we need to address. 1, you either think you're more knowledgeable than me when it comes to medicine, and if that's the case, I should no longer be your son's doctor. Or you don't trust me as a physician, and in that case, I shouldn't be your son's doctor." Mom just sits there with a blank stare on her face. Attending: "Will you please reconsider giving your son a vaccine?" Mom: "No." My attending obviously treated her kid, but after this whole ordeal resolved, he dropped her and her son as patients and referred them to another pediatrician. He'd had enough of her. I respected the heck out of him after he pulled this move. Pediatric resident here in the US. Our continuity clinic accepts everyone, including those kicked out of previous practices for anti-vaccination beliefs, which is a bit frustrating at times. Really, it's a mixed bag of how we handle these patients. Ostracizing the parents is only going to build further barriers between provider and kid, so that doesn't help. Frankly, what has worked best in my experience is to try to understand where the families are coming from, explicitly asking their thoughts on vaccines to let them voice their misunderstandings. Oftentimes, this is the first time they've been allowed to talk about their questions and concerns regarding vaccines with a trained MD who doesn't belittle them. Most frustratingly, it takes patience and time. Assessing where they're regarding change, pre-contemplation, contemplation, etc., helps determine where we are for vaccinating them today, in a month, or in a few months. One thing that I do draw the line on is to make sure that we see these kids more frequently than normal children, as they are at higher risks for illnesses because they're not vaccinated. No room for negotiation on that point. This helps twofold. First, it helps build rapport with the family, but also secondly, if they decide to take a delayed schedule, which is still not ideal but better than no vaccines, we can eventually catch them up to speed with their vaccinations by frequent return visits. Interestingly, it's always the yoga pants Karen types that are the anti-vaxxer, or pro-measles as I've been calling them lately, rather than the less educated single moms on welfare or the recent immigrants that speak no English. Ultimately, we're the kids' docs and their advocates, and are most effective when we ally with the families, or better put, get the families to ally with us, and do have to be stern after a certain point. It's a mix of being stern but also compromising to work with families to provide their kids with as much and the best care as possible. I really like this poster's point of view, and I think it's really interesting to hear it coming from someone who has to deal with these kind of people on a frequent basis in medical circumstances, but has found the best way to have the interaction without having the child suffer, which at the end of the day is the only one who would. I was a med student at the time on an OB rotation, was waiting for my attending when he came in and just basically grunted and lightly tapped his head off the keyboard before beginning to click away. I asked what happened and he explained that the couple that was here for a C-section were refusing vaccines. Now, vaccinating is a topic I have strong feelings about, so I asked him if I could go talk to them. He allowed it. I went in and introduced myself and said I had heard they did not want to vaccinate their soon-to-be-born and wanted to talk about any questions or misinformation they may have heard. Quick picture, young white couple, the father wearing a tank top, backwards hat with a tear tattoo under his eye. You get the idea. He explains, "My buddy out east, yo, he has kids and they got vaccinated and now they slow. I got other kids and they ain't vaccinated and they ain't slow. That's proof right there." I knew what I was getting myself into, but continued the conversation trying to let them know the truth about vaccinating. About 10 minutes later of me hitting my head against the wall, I realized there's no way I'm changing their minds. So I take my leave. I later come back to help bring the mother in to prep her for the C-section. It was myself and one nurse when the father stops us and says we can't take his wife anywhere without him. I explained it's a sterile environment and once we get prepped, I'll come out and bring him in. He still refuses and is getting upset at this point, which is when he drops the bomb. "If I'm not there, that's when you're gonna put the chip in her." I said, "Pardon?" He went on to explain he thought we were going to insert a chip that would control his wife or keep tabs on her or something along those lines. Ended up convincing him to wait 10 minutes and I would come get him. It took everything in my power not to write on her arm, "Insert chip here." During the surgery, my attending actually ended up convincing him to allow certain vaccinations. I can't remember which, but it was a small victory. I feel like Family Guy said it best. There's an episode where Lois and Peter kidnap this child to get him to a hospital because the parents believe prayer will heal their kid. So Lois eventually has to confront them and says something like, maybe the vaccines and medicines are God's answers to your prayers. So why keep praying if you're just going to wipe yourself with his reply? When I was a medical student, I had a 5-year-old patient who looked and acted like a 2-year-old. Failure to thrive. His mother was super weird. She shaved the sides of his head, something like a marine cut, but kept his hair long in the back. She refused to vaccinate him or even feed him certain foods. Her sister and her husband were trying to get custody of the child because his mother was weird and didn't take care of him properly. I suspect she was paranoid. She would literally fight and call you names if you attempt to suggest to put the kid on a proper hospital diet. She wanted to inspect the food first and make sure he eats only certain things. Long story short, the attending called county and they took the child away from her. Not a doctor yet, but a med school student. A fellow student of mine is very happy about not being completely vaccinated. She's also happy that our country, Germany, is still a free country considering vaccination, since she believes that they don't really work. At this point, I'd like to remind you that she is a medical student, and at least once a year, we have to have a medical checkup to make sure our mandatory vaccinations are in order, simply because we're studying and working at a hospital with a lot of immunocompromised patients. Anyway, she was happy to inform me that she only got the vaccinations that were absolutely mandatory. So she got no tetanus shot, for example, and believes she will never get tetanus simply because she doesn't want to and she believes that's enough, since our minds are so capable of healing our bodies if we let them go free. For example, by using hallucinogenic drugs. Luckily, that can only harm her and no others. I'm really not a bad person, but I kind of hope she cuts her foot on a rusty nail and gets a little bit of tetanus. Nothing that will kill her or have any lasting effect on her, besides maybe convincing her that vaccines work. I really don't want her to become a doctor. I had a kid come in that was super sick, 3 years old and in septic shock. He had the flu and another compounded viral infection, or maybe pertussis. Heart rate was close to 200, respiratory rate in the 50s, blood pressure in the 70s. The kid was so dry that we could barely get IVs into him and I almost had to drill an IO. We dumped a ton of fluids into him, started him on vasopressors, and transferred him to the local children's hospital. I asked the mom if he was vaccinated and she said, "No, vaccines have really bad side effects. They'll make you sick." I explained to her that not getting the vaccine had made her kid 10 times sicker than he ever would have been from any mild vaccine reaction. She told me I was a moron and that I obviously have no clue what I'm talking about, and that's the reason her kid was getting transferred. She also told me that recommending she vaccinate her kids was racist. Yeah, the end of that one is kind of a big question mark. We want everyone to be vaccinated. That's kind of the point. Race is completely irrelevant. Bringing race into this conversation is really weird. Got another one for you here. Same old story. Their pseudoscience gets them Facebook likes, but as soon as something arises, they are straight to the local emergency department demanding they be fixed. Demanding the best treatment. Demanding all the magic equipment is brought out to fix and save their kids' lives. But vaccines and big pharma are bad. Very bad. But please save my kid's life. I trust you now to fix the problem, but if you try to prevent the problem in the first place, you're a stupid doctor who works for big pharma. It's so stupid. I have the opposite of what you're expecting to hear, I assume. As a medical student, I went to see a young child less than 1 year old in the outpatient clinic before the attending. The child was due for vaccines, and I talked to the parents about getting them on that day. The parents said they had reservations about them, so I talked to them about their reservations. We talked about all of the things they'd read on the internet and walked through each point one by one. One of the benefits of being the medical student is you have nothing but time. I explained how vaccines are made and how they work. They don't have the mercury preservative they once did. Some vaccines are live but attenuated, and others are immunogenic sequences bound to a protein. And why we get so many so early. That's when you're most likely to be affected by these diseases. They were concerned about the effects of so many vaccines at once. This is a common concern, but we challenge your system less with a vaccine than you see walking around in the world every day. And they asked about them making the child sick. Not possible with anything but a live vaccine, and that's why those are attenuated. They're such a small dose that a non-immunocompromised individual should have no problem with them, even though you might feel a little sick because we activate your immune system. And that's how you feel when that happens. The whole discussion probably took about a half an hour, and then they decided to go forward with the vaccines. As it turns out, most people are just scared, and who can blame them? With all the misinformation in the world, it's easy to see how parents get to that point. But they're also human, and when you sit down and talk to them like the people that they are, intelligent and able to understand your points, they respond in a positive way. It's one of the moments in medical school that I reflect on frequently, especially when things are tough and I feel like being impatient with people. Again, we have another doctor who's being very understanding of the parent's point of view. It's true that there's so much misinformation out in the world right now, and not just about vaccines. It's easy to get confused and get a little worried, especially when it comes to the health of your newborn. But like the poster said, you talk to them like adults and they will respond like adults. I had a mother bring in her child to see me as a new patient. When I saw that he wasn't vaccinated, I asked my nurse why not, and she told me that the mother had a religious exemption. When I entered the room, I asked the mom what the religious exemption was, and she said, "Oh, well, when he was a baby, he had a rash from the hepatitis B vaccine." I kindly told her that I couldn't care for her child because he was not only a risk to my staff, myself, but also to other patients in my office. She went off on me and ranted about, "I can't believe that every doctor's office I call refuses to treat my son because he's not vaccinated. And that the only doctor in the country that will see him can't see him for almost 2 months." I kindly stopped her and said, if I was one of the few that refused to treat your child, I would understand your frustration. But don't you think there's a message that not a single doctor in the entire county, save for one doctor who did some pretty questionable practices, think essential oils and stuff, will treat your kid? Then maybe there's a valid reason behind it? Yeah, she definitely wasn't happy when she left. I had a 76-year-old anti-vax patient the other day, although not really a parent story. Funnily enough, she came in for her flu vax and the conversation went like this while I was preparing to give it to her. "They're injecting too many chemicals into people nowadays." Me, confused. "Do you want your flu shot then?" Her. "No, I mean the children. Back in my day, we all had measles and got over it. I think it's better for the body's immune system to handle it." Me. Actually, rates of deaths and complications from measles were much higher in the past compared to complications of vaccines. There's actually this video that explains it quite well, referring to the recent Kurzgesagt video. Her. "I despise those things. Computers, televisions, I won't watch it." Me. Okay, let's just agree to disagree. Just thought it was funny how she obviously wanted protection from the flu instead of letting her immune system do the job while criticizing childhood vaccinations, when kids obviously lack a fully developed immune system. Also, she obviously wasn't getting her info from any up-to-date sources given her disdain of TV and computers, but I guess her gut feeling trumps my medical knowledge? Teachers of Reddit? What is your "this student is so smart it's scary" story? One of my kindergartners just knows multiplication, and not just the basics 5s or 10s. In the beginning, when his parents told me, I played along with 2 times 2 or 10 times 10, but you can tell him 17 times 14 and he knows it instantly. So cool to watch. I was doing a 500-piece puzzle with some kids. I was a preschool teacher. We finished the puzzle except for one piece, which was nowhere to be found. Kid comes in, takes one look at the puzzle on the table and says, "Oh, you're missing that? I know where it is." Reaches into a completely different 500-piece puzzle, rummages for like 10 seconds, pulls the piece out, and fits it in. I asked him how he knew it was there. He said he had done the other puzzle for a bit and noticed it. I asked him how long ago. Christmas, he says. It was February at the time. The kid was maybe 5. Might be more memory than intelligence, but that was crazy to see. Such a great kid, in somewhat dire circumstance. I hope he's gotten all the opportunities he deserved. I work with 18 to 24-month-olds, and we have an 18-month-old who can have literal conversations. Perfect sentence structures, perfect verb conjunction, perfect pronunciation, even L and R. Knows all the alphabets, numbers, colors, shapes by sight. Some of the others know some of those things, but I've never seen a baby this advanced. I sometimes forget she's only 1 year old because she seems more like 3.5. Just tiny like a 1-year-old. Her dad brought her back from a well baby checkup telling us that the doctor asked, "Does she say any words yet?" And we all lulled because she has full conversations. We had a 4-year-old in preschool. He was sitting under the table writing down numbers for a long time. He had no time to talk to us. When he came out and we looked at what he'd been doing, he said he wrote down all the multiplications. It turns out his brother in 5th grade was learning the multiplication table, and this little brother really wanted to do the same, but didn't have a multiplication table. He counted on his fingers to add each column and got the table right. A few days later, he knew multiplication. He would also comment on dates. If someone said that they had a birthday on June 12th, he would say, "Oh, that's in 184 days." Almost immediately. On an excursion, we passed some statues with birth and death dates, and he would casually sum up. He was 78 years and 110 days old. She was born 33 years and 120 days before him, etc. I think he was more focused and willing to understand than necessarily so smart. I don't know about that last comment. That kid sounds pretty frickin' smart to me. I taught high school math. One of my freshman students divided 1,134 by 63 in his head in less than a second. I let him finish the problem, and then after he arrived at his answer, I asked him, "How did you do that?" He looked at me with this blank stare as if he was thinking, "You can't do that?" He proceeded to say, "Well, I doubled 63 and then multiplied that by 10, and then I saw that 1,134 was just the difference of those two numbers, so 18. And looked at me like it was nothing. I told him good work and moved on. I'm only above average at a few things, but one of them is mental math. When I saw that this kid could do this calculation that I couldn't, I was so happy. It was one of my happiest moments as a teacher. I didn't help him in that moment, but to know I played a small part in his math education felt so good. I have a 5-year-old this year who has stolen my wallet more times than I'd like to admit, from my pocket, without me knowing. I now wear a wallet chain like I don't remember what decade it is. He still tries, but he hasn't figured out a workaround. Yet. Feel like this kid may be more street smart. I'm a piano teacher on the side. I'm currently teaching a 4-year-old how to read sheet music before she can read books. I ask her to find the C's and she'll point them out on the page and things like that. She can also do math really well and understands the concept of multiplication. Also, another student that just started and plays by ear and composes her own pieces at 8. She also speaks 5 languages, which I didn't find out until I told her I was learning German. After teaching her for 3 months, she's already to the point where I had to send her to a better teacher. My mom was a student teacher in the early 1970s. She recounts the story of a gifted first grader that nobody really knew how to handle. Every day, her mentor would give the child a copy of the New York Times and let him read during her class. Much later, my mom was working as a speech therapist and had a severely autistic child that would come in daily. After their lessons, he would spend his free time drawing elaborate and accurate city maps on the whiteboard. It was fascinating. I worked at a special purpose preschool designed for kids on the autism spectrum. Did an intake day with a kiddo, 4 years old, where I was just trying to have fun and see what kind of things he liked. We did some time on the computer where we surfed around YouTube a bit, and he searched up a video about our solar system and began to explain to me the difference between the inner solar system and the outer solar system. What they're made of, sizes, electromagnetic fields to compensate for distance from the sun, etc. I had to Google everything he was saying because I had no idea if it was true. Spoiler alert, it was. This story in particular, I feel, is one of those things where if a kid focuses on one thing they really love, they will know everything about that one thing. Their mind is like a sponge and they will absorb all the information about that thing that they love. For us as adults, we might have known this stuff a long time ago or maybe never learned it, but trying to absorb it now, especially with moderate interest, is very difficult. Not a teacher, but had a classmate who was and still is a genius. I distinctly remember him asking very complex questions on the current reading literature and making constructive arguments. It was over my head, but our teacher was offended and argued back that he didn't understand anything. I think they were well over her head as well. She screamed at him and stormed out of the class a number of times. There was a time she asked him to leave as well. I never felt so bad for a classmate. He didn't deserve to be yelled at like that. I believe he's now a mathematician with published works and awards as well as a successful musician. I have a student who's an immigrant that speaks fluent English. I assume that she grew up in the USA, but she told me that she'd only been here for a year and knew zero English before coming. I was amazed. I have another student who just does calculations instantly in his head. He doesn't even have to think. When he learns more math, it just comes automatic. He explained that numbers just make sense. I teach kids with autism that learn on the alternate curriculum, usually lower level academics, and have cognitive delays. I'm always amazed that while they might struggle in one area, they're very strong in another. I had one girl who knew everyone's birthday, everyone she met, day, month, year, and age. She could also do crazy math in her head. I have another kid who's minimally verbal but knows every locker combination in the school. Two others who are amazing artists. Another who could tell you what 80s movie icon shared a birthday with you. I love my kids. A kid's work kept deleting itself on a computer every few minutes. He was having a meltdown and I saw it happen. It was impossible to explain the phantom deleting that was going on. Fast forward to the end of class and there's one kid remaining that was sitting at the opposite computer from the kid who lost all his work. He looks at me and says, "You want to know how I did it, sir?" He had put a USB keyboard into the back of the computer and had it set up so he could hit the delete key with his big toe. It was the funniest stealth attack I'd seen in a long time. Being the teacher, I should have done something, but it was too funny and smart. I don't know, it sounds like this kid might be the smartest one yet. I had a first grader with a speech impediment who was asking for a type of book. His peers and I couldn't understand him no matter how hard we tried. Finally, he gave up and without any frustration, he found a picture book with someone stirring a pot on the cover. He opened the book and skimmed through words until he found what he was looking for, the word cooking. He showed me the book and pointed, telling me that was the word he'd been trying to say. He wanted a cookbook. This was a 6-year-old. My mom had a special needs student who went on some field trip to one of the NASA centers. I don't remember where. His dad was an IT guy, I think, and had been teaching this kid, around 10 years old, stuff on the side because he was all about computers. The kid wandered off and apparently found some office or computer lab or something unlocked. Walked in, sat down at a computer, figured out how to unlock that terminal, and started browsing through their internal stuff for a while before someone caught him. He got in big trouble for that one, but I don't know if it even registered in his mind what a huge issue that could be. He would do it at school and nobody cared too much, so I don't think he saw an issue doing it out in the real world. He came to my mom the next year or the year after that when his family moved. And my mom was warned not to leave her personal electronics unattended because he would figure out how to get in. I had a student maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I teach social studies, so didn't come in direct contact with her areas she was truly special. But anyway, she could speak 5 languages pretty fluently. English is her native, and she learned French in middle school, taught herself Russian and Italian for the sake of reading, and learned Indonesian from being around kids in the school and wanting to pick it up. She could write music just from hearing it and then reproduce it in essentially no time. I don't know if this is common or not, but it absolutely shocked me. She's bar none the best student I've seen as a teacher with regards to conveying herself through written work. She graduated just a few weeks after turning 16. One of those kids who effortlessly glides to the top of her class. Last I heard, she was about to graduate in something related to archaeology. I was a student teacher at the time, completing my education degree. I taught 8th grade. There was this one girl who was your typical edgy, angsty 13-year-old who was too cool for everything. When we went through our poetry unit, we gave a project in which the kids had to write their own freeform poem and put it in some sort of video or slideshow. This girl wrote a poem about how the United States education system as it is stifles creativity and destroys students' joy of learning. I always remember this one line from her poem. I learned more from an evening watching Hamilton on stage than an entire year in a United States history class. The video was your typical angsty black and white shots of her friends standing solemnly in front of or behind chain link fences and signs that say no trespassing. The next day, she showed up with a gigantic biography of Alexander Hamilton. It was bigger than most Bibles. It only took her a week to read it. My mentor teacher hated her because she thought the student thought that she was smarter than everyone else and was arrogant. Maybe she did think that. Maybe she thought we were annoying simpletons. But I just thought she was dope as heck. This kid didn't particularly like or dislike me, hated my mentor teacher, and disliked anyone except a couple friends. She was sassy and smart, had a finely tuned bull meter, and had a huge vocabulary and an obvious love of learning. She'd grill out book after book. And where my mentor teacher saw arrogance in her poem project, I just saw a girl who was desperately bored and was asking for a challenge. I tried my best to give her extra, more challenging options in the future for her assignments. She never said anything to me, but I got the feeling she appreciated it. Or I hope she did. My son has a fascination with nuclear physics and science. He's collected commonly found radioactive minerals that I made him get rid of so the whole house doesn't get cancer. He's researching a way to build a miniature thorium reactor and insists the only reason it doesn't exist now is because people have given up on it. He's 15. My oldest daughter is an incredible artist, but she's got that attitude like her poop doesn't smell. She's always made incredible drawings with simple pencils and paper since she was a child. She could capture your likeness in her mind with a glance and draw you out with a piece of standard white typing paper and an office number 2. She's now 18. This one sounds like it might be a mom just very proud and maybe exaggerating a little bit about her kids. I'm not a teacher, but my uncle is a professor at a uni in our state. He teaches a notoriously hard class where the final average is in the B range. Some kid managed to get a 99 on the exam, and because it hadn't happened in a few years, my uncle rounded the grade to a 100. I don't know if he was allowed to. And what's even more crazy is that the last person to get an A+ on the final was the student's cousin, who had recommended the class to him when he found out that he got in the school. I don't want to rat this student out, but I feel like maybe his cousin just gave him the answers. I coach Science Olympiad, which naturally draws some very smart students. I was on a long bus ride with them to nationals and sat next to one of our 7th graders. This kid had to be one of the smartest kids I've ever met. He's brilliant. We ended up playing 20 questions and I decided to be a jerk and do something really hard and specific, settling on whiptail lizard. First question, is it a vertebrate? I said yes. Second question, does it reproduce parthenogenically? Yes. Third question, it's a whiptail lizard. Kid got my obscure animal in 3 guesses. He just graduated high school last year. I believe he's going to an IV. I teach ESL in China and have this one 7-year-old student who remembers everything. He'll read a word or a sentence and then remember it a year later and point it out in his book. I had forgotten it. I'll say a word and he pronounces it perfect and always will. He speaks better than my daughter and has a larger vocabulary. I like him most because he understands what he's saying, reading, and hearing. He'll often pre-read and understand it without being told. He would brag and ask embarrassing questions until I told him that he should be trying to help the other students, and that making them feel bad slows them down. Now he helps the others understand the material. I had a student with autism who could calculate trigonometry ratios in his head to several decimal places. We can ask, "Hey George, what's the sine of 62? George would take a few seconds and shout, 0.88295. I have never figured out how he did it without a calculator. He had violent outbursts and terrible social skills. He's been in and out of jail since high school, and I've lost track of him over the years. It's really sad. I teach woodshop. The brilliance I see is different than most teachers would. I have students that I give a little knowledge and they can manipulate it and apply it to unrelated problems. I've had a few students where they have mostly D's and F's, but run rings around my students because they have crazy good 3D reasoning and can apply knowledge that isn't linear pattern recognition. I work with special needs kids and will never forget this one high-functioning autism, mostly just social and sensory issues, who was also a math genius. He was 4 years old, and whenever we would have a group play hide and seek, everyone would count to 10, except him. He would say things like, "I'll give you 20 seconds to hide, so I'll count to 540 by 27s, or some other randomness. I would listen in and write all his counts down and check them later, and he always nailed them 100%. My statistics teacher in high school wasn't the brightest, and she learned calculus-based statistics instead of what she was supposed to teach us, so she got confused sometimes. The previous semester, she had one of the smartest kids in the school in her stats class, and my high school had like 30 out of 400 people of the class every year go to Ivy League schools. Anyway, every test, the student would take the test up to my stats teacher and show her at least one problem that just wasn't right. I don't know how, because she literally told us in class how the smart kid found at least one big mistake or a better way to do the question or something every single exam. Kid came into kindergarten halfway through the year. Youngest kid in the class. The rest of the class was working on 3-letter words like cat, and he sounded out encyclopedia without difficulty. Started sending him to do math with the second graders by the end of his second week, which was holding him back, honestly. I had to talk to his parents about finding a program better suited to his needs, unfortunately. In addition to being brilliant, he was also incredibly sweet. I teach gifted and talented first and second graders. I've had a lot of very smart students over the years. Some with amazing sense where they can understand most math concepts before I teach it. For example, they see the connections between multiplication and equivalent fractions and immediately can simplify or find greatest common factors. Several read at the high school level, but maybe don't really get the social context of what they're reading. Usually I can maintain some control in the classroom because they're 7 or 8, and I'm an adult and have been teaching kids like them for years. This year, I have one little girl who writes beautifully. She's very talented, but that's all she wants to do. While I enjoy talking with her about her craft and helping her think of a good transition for scenes in her stories, these are the types of questions she has for me, I also have to teach her math, and teach the rest of the class too. Recently, she's been going through some challenging emotions. She gets angry at others, lashes out, and has been defiant with adults. So she was arguing with me about having to do a math problem on equivalent fractions when she's already demonstrated mastery of the skill. I think she's heard me use this phrase in reference to her spelling. She passed out of spelling. Honestly, she caught me off guard. So I said, fine, show me you can do these 3 problems and we'll call it good. So she did. And she got what she wanted. I realized later what she did. She's right. Really, if you can demonstrate mastery, you don't need practice. So now she tries this with everything in every skill she doesn't particularly like. She's exhausting, but she's fun to mentally spar with. I have many students who are smarter than I am, but she's the first one to outmaneuver me. I taught honors algebra in middle school, which is a class for advanced 8th graders and the occasional super intelligent 7th grader. For reference, this is a high school level class, intended for advanced 9th graders, so a 7th grader is advanced and 2 years ahead of his or her peers. I had a 6th grader show up one year, which meant he was 4 years ahead of his peers. He came in midway through the year. I gave him a book. On his first test, he got a B and had a meltdown. He was on the spectrum, an autistic savant type, and he wasn't used to not getting a perfect score. Dude went home, grabbed the book, taught himself everything he had missed in a weekend, and got a perfect 100 from there on out. Insanely gifted and amazing that he could self-teach himself half a year in a weekend. I work with toddlers sometimes, and there's this girl they moved up from the infant room at 14 months. We usually wait till around 18 plus months because she was so far ahead of everyone else. She's 18 months now and she's fully potty trained and even wears underwear. She speaks perfectly clear and you can have full-blown conversations with her. She knows all her letters, she can write her name, she can write her brother's name, she can count to 100 in English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. She knows a ton of signs and not just the easy ones. She knows more than the teachers that are supposed to teach the kids American Sign Language. She recognizes her emotions and will come up and say, "I'm not feeling very brave today," or "I'm feeling embarrassed." She can also sign to you what emotions she's feeling. When we do magnetic letters, she'll tell you the letter and the color of the letter in English, Spanish, and American Sign Language. Meanwhile, I know a 19-month-old who can only say mama, dada, and no. Kids are so diverse. I've had a few different super smart kiddos. One student of mine with autism, when given any date from the 1900s or 2000s, could tell you what the day of the week was. He tried to explain to us how he knew once, but the explanation didn't make any sense to any of us. Another student of mine was hyperlexic, essentially the opposite of dyslexia. He could write well above his grade level and read any word you put in front of him. Once we gave him one of our college textbooks and he read it back to us. Didn't understand it, but pronounced every word correctly and read it fluently. He was a 1st grader. Finally, I recently had a 2nd grader who had already mastered the entirety of the 5th grade math curriculum, and everything before that. His previous teacher didn't know what to do with him, so she put him on Khan Academy all the time. I did what I could, but it's hard to keep up with kids so far above grade level. Reddit, what are some college majors that should definitely be avoided? If you're a journalism major, getting involved in student publications and media is way more important than classes. Journalists aren't hired based off their degree, but how well acclimated they are to newsrooms, deadlines, and things like that. You can't learn the trade in a classroom, only in the field. Classes are just to help you refine your skills and the little things. Standalone language majors. How are you, a student learning a language in less than 4 years, going to compete with a bilingual speaker who also has skills for the workforce? You have to pair it with something else. If you want to major in a language, you double major. I was looking for this one. I cannot tell you how many people major in a language without studying abroad and think they're going to be able to move to that country and work there. I did German and linguistics, double major, and am doing my master's in Germany with the intention of teaching English as a second language. Some of my friends just majored in French or German and planned on moving over here and getting any kind of job. This isn't something I've ever thought about, but makes a lot of sense when you lay it out like that. General studies. Just pick a major. Being undecided all 4 years won't look great on your first resume unless you leave undergrad with some amazing experience that translates into an immediate position. I was a history major. 'Twas fun, but no money. Now I'm a zookeeping major. Tons more fun and even less money. If you don't plan on getting at least a master's degree, avoid psychology. I've known several servers, bartenders, and receptionists that have their degree in psychology, even a few that have ended up in retail. Not that I look down on those jobs, just that they clearly don't require a psychology degree. To get a job in the field, you pretty much need to have a master's at least. Art history. My current roommate, out of college now, was an art history major. She doesn't do any art herself, she just really likes art. Spends a lot of her weekends going to museums and galleries. She can't find a job in what she wants to do. Has an entry-level position as an office administrator, and she hates it. She can't really move up much in her company because she doesn't have the knowledge of the industry she's in. She went to a private university for it, and will be paying off loans for a long time. This is one that before even coming to this thread, I heard was a rough one to try and get a job with. Be careful when studying music. Most universities offer music performance and music education. Getting a bachelor's in music education means you're certified to teach at a school, and therefore has a lot more potential of getting you a job. Music performance just means you got really good at playing your instrument. You'll still have job options such as giving lessons, starting your own studio, joining a professional symphony, or just being a freelance musician. But those all have varying levels of difficulty and instability. For example, to get into a symphony, you have to be the best of the best, at least for top-tier symphonies. So your probability of being hired depends solely on your audition. And to be a freelance musician means that there may be periods where you're unemployed. And even when you are hired by someone, you'll go most of the time without insurance or a retirement fund. And then you have to factor in the location you're in. If you're in an area that's musically dry, you won't be finding any paying gigs unless you're a teacher. There may be plenty of people wanting your services like churches, community bands, and musical pit orchestras, but you probably won't get paid. Yeah, unfortunately, artists and musicians have it rough nowadays, especially based on your area. Non-accredited majors. Even if it sounds like a good degree, mechanical engineering for example, it might not be accredited, meaning it doesn't hold anywhere near the value. I'm only using mechanical engineering as an example. This is normally an issue with university programs that are new, which means that their program normally wouldn't have accreditation. It would be in the application process. It's quite the gamble when you're a new student, because if they don't get accreditation by the time you graduate, you're SOL. Yeah, that would be the last thing you want, is to waste a whole bunch of money on a class that literally means nothing to anyone. Biology. Unless you want to go to med/farm/vet school or graduate school. A BS in biology won't get you very far, and you'll max out in earning potential early on. A lot of bio majors go back for their MS or PhD because they're stuck at low pay scale. If you already know that's what you want to do, you're fine. Make sure you do a BS and not a BA though. Don't do something you dislike because you think it's a good career path. Work is going to be a major part of your life, so aiming for something you can't stand doing is a bad idea. I'm fighting with that sort of. I decided to major in something I love, but I hate it now because it's becoming a career instead of a hobby. The career I want is generally lower pay, but I'd rather major in that because I'd actually be happy. This is the conflict I think a lot of college students go through. There's the thing that you want to do, but you kind of don't want to do it as a job because then you won't want to do it anymore. Versus the thing that you don't want to do, but it pays really well. I don't know. It's a tough decision to make either way. My last job was at a gas station chain, and I met at least 3 hourly gas station managers who had biology master's degrees. Blew my mind that they were attempting to pay down $120,000 worth of loans on $20 an hour. Everyone I know with a bio or biochem master's is employed in research or by private firms. What the heck were your coworkers doing? Criminal justice. It seems to be the new default major for people who don't actually know what they want to do now that psychology is out of vogue. I work at a courthouse and I never graduated college. Most of the new people are trying to get in with criminal justice degrees because it'll look good on their resume, and there are a ton of people applying with that major. Very competitive. Criminal justice sounds like something that would be useful if you're going for something in the law field, but maybe not? I don't know. It's not always just about the major, but what else you do in school. I got my degree in anthropology, which as a bachelor's doesn't mean much in itself. But I managed to get into courses where I did actual research and got my name co-published in a couple professional journals. That was something I've been able to market to employers as much, if not more, than the degree. Same thing goes for something often badmouthed, like women's studies. I have 2 close friends who went that route and are both employed in careers. Women's studies, not STEM, prepared them to go on to get social work degrees, which is where they now make their living. Agreed. An in-demand major helps, but doesn't mean jack if you don't put in the work to network and intern. A crappy degree held by someone who did internships for at least the latter half of their education will be looked at better than a good degree holder with no experience. So, incoming college goers, intern, network, schmooze. Yeah, I think more and more places are going routes like this. Your college degree doesn't exactly mean a whole lot. Everyone wants experience. Or if you've managed to get an internship somewhere, then you've already gotten your foot in the door. Problem with internships is a lot of the time you're working for free for a while without a guaranteed job at the end of it. Unless you eat, sleep, and breathe architecture, do not even consider it as a major. You'll spend more money, more sleepless nights, and more of your sanity than any other student. Unless you have the passion necessary to make those sacrifices, forget it. Learn from my mistakes. I just finished a dual master's in architecture and urban design. Everything you said 100%, except now that I'm out and working, there was indeed light at the end of the tunnel. I feel bad talking crap about my own degree, but biomedical engineering. Maybe not avoid it, but make sure you have an idea of what you like at the beginning or early as possible, and tailor your work experience, classes, and training to that speciality. For example, if you like prosthetics, have things that show you're ready to compete with mechanical and electrical engineers over the same position, and that your biology and anatomy knowledge gives you an edge over them. All other engineers have obvious fields they can go into. Biomed is simply just not as flushed out, and employees may just pick grads with majors they fully understand. In my undergrad, I went more of the bioinformatics route and did a lot of coding, so I load up my resume with that stuff, and had 2 internships that furthered my coding ability. But would it have been easier if I just did computer engineering? Possibly. Avoid any major starting with pre-law, pre-med, anything like that. I know several people who became doctors with degrees in chemistry, biology, or engineering. I also know someone who finished pre-med, went to med school, realized he didn't want to be a doctor, and was screwed. He ended up spending 4 years getting a second bachelor's degree. Likewise, you can easily get a law degree and become a lawyer with degrees in all sorts of things. You can't do anything else with a pre-law degree. Criminal justice. I'm about 2 months away from having my AA in criminal justice, but every law enforcement professional I met said don't waste your time getting your bachelor's in criminal justice. Get it in something practical like business or engineering. So if God forbid something happens to you, then you have a degree in something else to fall back on. I want to be a police officer, by the way. That's the second time this one's come up. Maybe that is one to avoid. Don't do a business major if even the smallest amount of math freaks you out. Even in things that aren't accounting or finance, you'll still have to do a little bit in most entry-level positions. I feel like that one's kind of a given. If you're gonna be in business, you're gonna be handling numbers. Graphic design. The market is oversaturated with designers. Design is very subjective. No matter what jargon pro designers may throw at you about color theory and the golden ratio, when it comes down to you finding a job, it's all about if the employer likes what they see. The current industry is being devalued by sites like Fiverr and 99 Designs, where companies will pay pennies to get a logo or a flyer made. This makes companies not value or need in-house designers. Design agencies are very stuck up, and the culture is almost always cutthroat. The pay sucks. Depending on your city, the entry-level pay can fluctuate, but you'll be making nowhere near the money you could with other forms of education. You most likely will not be doing what you love unless you get lucky. If you become an in-house designer, be prepared to only design stuff related to whatever your company specializes in for the rest of your employment there. If you're hired at an agency, you'll have more opportunities to work on different brands, but may not be the brands you're interested in. If you don't like a crap ton of physics, or if you're not at least somewhat into it, don't go into lucrative engineering fields, because there's a very high chance you'll switch out. If you're in it only for the money, there's a big wake-up call heading for you. Again, engineering, you're gonna be doing a lot of math, gotta be prepared for that. First of all, almost every major is useless if you can't show employers what you learned with it, i.e. internships, publications, research, papers and projects beyond what is expected of a college assignment, and things like that. Also, you may have the risk of making your degree useless if you want to stay in a certain area. In doing so, you're limiting your job prospects in that industry. For example, you major in art history, but there's only one art museum in the state and you don't want to leave the state. Secondly, most majors themselves have some degree of usefulness. Supposedly useless majors such as philosophy, history, and psych can be great prep for an advanced grad school degree like pre-law or other intensive writing and research degrees. Others, like English, classics, and journalism, show that you can write well. which is always valuable and can lead to jobs in copywriting, editing, and things like that. That being said, there are some degrees I would not recommend getting. Sports management for one. Coming from someone that worked at the highest levels of athletics, a sports management degree is useless. While there are jobs in sports, they just require you to grind and they're really competitive to get. I know for a fact that hiring managers don't give a crap about what degree you have, except for maybe like athletic training. They just care about your experience. So sports management itself doesn't get you hired, and it eliminates career options if a career in sports doesn't work out. It's also getting a rep that it's an easy major, in which I agree is the case with about 98% of sports management programs. Again, going to what I said earlier using the art history example, probably isn't a great idea to major in sports management if you attend a small private NAIA school in the middle of Iowa. Other useless majors include dance or ballet if you have a bad knee or back, and African American studies from North Carolina. Google UNC academic scandal. Sometimes you do need to use a little bit of common sense. I've seen a lot of people saying foreign language unless you double major. Nobody has yet mentioned that Japanese isn't a happy life, period. There's literally thousands of other Westerners pining for that English teaching job in Japan, and they treat you like dirt when you get there. I'm sure I could name like half a dozen people off the top of my head that would love a job like that. In the UK, if you can afford not to, don't do law. Many law firms I stumbled across prefer non-law rigorous degrees, linguistics, maths, and hard science, and a conversion to law afterwards. If you get good enough grades, you might be able to get your degrees for free because some firm or inn of court will pay for it. If you want to do IP law, just do science. Whatever area of science you graduate from is the area that you can do patents. Also, you can work in the patents office. If you don't want to do law, you'll always get asked the question as to why you studied law and you're not working in law, as I got when I was trying to get a job in PR. Finally, if you want to be a solicitor, forget the LPC. A new super exam came out in 2020, and you won't need to spend 10 to 20k on the LPC to qualify. You will, however, need 2 years work experience, so get that now. Again, another example, everyone just wants you to have experience. They feel you learn more from actually doing the job than from learning about the job. Don't go to college, period, unless you know what you want to do. We've been looking at this all wrong. Start with where you want to be in 10 to 15 years, and then work backwards. What's between you and that place? If college is one of those things, then go to college. Looking at it the wrong way is how we've ended up with $1 trillion in student loan debt. Don't just go to college for the sake of going to college. It would literally be cheaper to travel around the world, and you'd learn more. This is something I completely agree with. This is something I've said before too. Figure out where you want to be and work backwards from there. Then start towards your goal. Graphic design. Honestly, a decent major. Just make sure you take it somewhere you'll have passionate professors and not ones that just link you to a YouTube tutorial. It's easy to teach yourself graphic design rather than dish out like $40,000 to learn it. As someone who's currently enrolled, I definitely agree. Although there is some expectations for students to solve design problems on their own, I think. Professors can only give you the building blocks, not the answer. Second time graphic design came up, and that does sound like a really cool one to work in. Sounds like the way to go is maybe learn yourself online and just start making a portfolio. Anthropology. Last I heard, they crank out about 3,000 master's degrees a year, while there are about 300 job openings per year in the field. Most people, I would say, don't do anthropology to be an anthropologist. A relative got an anthropology degree at 45 and used it to go into financial counseling. There are no bad majors, only bad planning. Your degree doesn't matter in getting a job as much as the grades you get and the work experience you get during the summer. Of course, if you want to do an actual profession, and I mean a profession like medicine, law, or engineering, you do need the requisite degree and good grades and good work experience. Save again for the caveat above, no one really expects you to do anything with what you learned at bachelor's level. What the degree is supposed to do is advertise your abilities and skills. Whether we like it or not, employers will look at academic ability as a key indicator of how trainable and employable you are. Many people downplay the value of good internships and work experience. Yes, a lot of terrible places don't pay at all, but unfortunately, the market is that you need to have experience. You can ask, how could a history major work at an iBank? It's not what you learn from a book, but the skills, analytical, critical thinking, and things like that. It also shows good motivation, planning, and goals. I know many people who did useless degrees who were in some good, non-related jobs. What they did right was good grades, good work experience, and good planning. Unless you're getting into a specialized field, a degree is what a high school diploma was 30 years ago. I'm getting a degree in something I enjoy, philosophy, because everywhere I'd like to work requires something. I don't expect to make a lot, but I expect to make more than I would have without it. It might be easier for me to say this as a Canadian though. Tuition is only around $8,000 with textbooks where I live. My goal is to get my degree and find some office jobs until I land something I like. I just want a clock in, clock out kind of thing. It's easier to have these goals for myself though, since I don't want kids. Other people might have to be more concerned about their finances and earning potential. This is one way to handle it. You get a degree for relatively cheap that's gonna end you a job that pays you well, and you go from there until you find something that you really want to do for the rest of your life. Unless you have future plans for grad school or a specific career path you're dead set on, in my opinion, it doesn't matter. Picking something broad like sciences, econ, tech-based, or communications works great. I spent many years past 4 because I thought my major would dictate the rest of my life. It doesn't. You can always go back to community college for a class or two if you want something extra for a specific position you're applying for. Most jobs are entry level and just want to see a bachelor's degree and provide on-the-job training. Doing sales for any company requires knowledge of their specific CRM system, sales approaches, their product that you would never get a major in. One major I have had friends struggle with post-graduation job searching is English, unless they went into teaching or writing a book. If you major in the pure sciences, chem, physics, or biology, you'll have no career in your field without a PhD. And if you're smart enough to complete a PhD in those fields, you're smart enough to do something easier and better paying. I myself got off the research plantation and moved into technical sales when I realized how little of a future there was in chemistry, and my wife moved to statistics and data science. It really sucks to hear that people put in so much time and money into something that they think they're going to be passionate about for the rest of their lives, only to lose that passion or struggle to find a job, or get a job that doesn't pay enough, and they're just in crippling debt for years. What did your school waste money on that nobody liked? They made a huge screen with 4 plasma screens and put it in a very random place in a random building hall. All 4 just constantly said no signal and nothing else. Name tags. Shortly after Columbine and all those other shootings peaked in frequency, it was supposed to keep outsiders from getting in the school unnoticed and shooting everyone. But at the time, people doing the shootings were always students, so we joked that they were bulletproof. This does sound like one of those decisions that was made in response to something happening in current events, and maybe wasn't exactly thought through all the way. Some of my classmates won a bunch of money for our school. Our school was one of the lowest funded schools in the district. The district took the money and spent it on another school. Maybe that school needed it more or needed it for something really important, but yeah, either way, that doesn't seem fair on surface level. The large schoolyard at my school had a set of planters in the center. There were basically 4 triangles made of brick that pointed in at each other and created an X-shaped walkway between. The outside sides had a bench each attached. People would sit and chat to each other on the benches, teachers and students alike. There was very little litter or vandalism. The plants were kinda pretty insofar as any secondary schooler would care to notice. One year, a duck made her nest in one of the planters, and apart from a few "oh, hey, a duck nest" comments, it was left alone. Then, for some reason, the school decided to rip the planters out. Took them 2/3 of the school year to do it, and blocked off the X walkways so everyone had to crush by on the outside lanes between classes. Everyone was super curious as to what the planters would be replaced by. Turns out, nothing. They simply bricked over the holes left by the planters and left it as a huge empty space. We didn't even get new benches, so no one had anywhere to sit during break. People started started to miss the plants since the lack of color left the whole area kinda bland. We also kept to the old X walkway since stepping over the former plants felt weirder. This seems like one of those times where it's just like, why? What was the issue? You spent a lot of time and money to just take something away that was nice? iPads for the kindergarten. They were intended to have educational apps on them that kids could play on at indoor recess. Believe it or not, most kindergartners would rather play on the swings or play with dolls than learn to write their name on an app. No one used them, no one liked them, and they all broke within 2 months. Yeah, that sounds like a waste of money if I ever heard one. I was on a boys' varsity soccer team in high school. The new head coach wanted to emphasize a more analytical approach, and as such had Booster Club buy a $10,000 goalpost camera. None of the team liked the idea anyway, especially since the girls' soccer team used their money for new jerseys and nicer balls, and they still made it farther in their playoffs than we did almost every year. As it turns out, the coach couldn't figure out how to put the camera together, and we never used it. Biggest waste of $10,000 I've ever seen. I'm sure there was a much cheaper option he probably could have gone for. Trash cans with the school logo on them and banners. They tried hyping us up about new trash cans on the morning show. At my school, they took away some of the tables in the cafeteria until we kept it cleaner. We just sat on the floor instead. When 65-inch TVs were like 4K a pop, they set about 8 of them around campus that just displayed the time. $4,000 clocks. Not to mention whatever they used as a video source to send to the display. This makes no sense to me that you would make an investment like this and then not make proper use of it. What is wrong with people? You can do so much more than just show the time. Be creative, come on. My high school purchased a vending machine that only contained Swerve. What is Swerve, you ask? Carbonated milk. Again, who's in charge of these ideas? A 3D printer that the teachers won't learn how to use, so now nobody's allowed to use it. My school got 4 of those, and the teacher responsible for them actually encouraged us to take the SolidWorks course to learn about 3D design. It was actually a lot of fun, and I still have some of the objects I created. Goes to show, a lot of the times it comes down to the person doing the teaching. They have to have some enthusiasm. A memorial tree was planted for a girl who was killed right before graduation by her family and friends. The school allowed it, and there was a beautiful Japanese maple tree there for like 10 years. Apparently they just cut it down and had no reason why. Everyone was pretty ticked off, especially the family. My son's current school sent out an email to parents announcing that they'd like to add voice projection to every class. He's in 1st grade and there are 20 kids in his class. Totally unnecessary. They had a demo session and it sounded horrible. My high school teacher got these midway through my junior year, and they sucked. The range wasn't great, and the receiver in one classroom would pick up the microphone in another, and the battery life was awful, so the teachers rarely used it. The best thing that they were used for was the one time that my teacher noticed a kid in the room across the hall was asleep in class. They were watching a video and the other teacher had stepped out of the room for a moment. They walked over to the door so that the other room's receiver would pick up his mic and said, "Wake up!" and then closed his door. This really does sound like a waste of money unless you specifically have a kid who has a hearing disability or something. And in that case, normally they have something that is individual to them that connects to their hearing aid and the teacher has a microphone so that they can hear them better. Not something that needs to be projected to the whole class. When I was still a student, my school spent almost $200,000 to paint the road outside our school. You read that right. Almost $200,000 of our precious tuition dollars to paint the roads outside blue and yellow. To pour salt on this painful wound, the paint job didn't even make it through winter. Just to reiterate, $200,000 for 3 months of painted road. I think I'm still angry about it. Who would hear that cost and decide, yeah, that sounds like a good investment? My high school wasted a ton of money buying 2 golf carts. Their reasoning was it allowed staff to get to any dangerous scenes faster. Except we never had any accidents and they were mostly used for joyrides by the hall monitors. You know what? This one I can kinda get behind. It's not some $200,000 expense and they got used and you had a little fun along the way. One of the schools in our district paid an astronomical fee to an artist to create artwork for the hall of the school, paid for the dude's room and board for like a year, and he produced a large polished piece of wood. No, literally, that's it. It was supposed to be shaped like a heart, but looks more like a butt, and is now known as the Bart. I'm sorry, but sometimes I do think that modern art is just ridiculous and a ripoff. My school just spent tens of millions of dollars on a remodel that includes a new commons and front office area, which were not needed, but no new classrooms, which were desperately needed. The old commons was warm, inviting, bright, and beautiful. It wasn't old. The new commons is dark, cold, sterile, and uninviting. The exterior was changed too. The entire front of the school used to be attractive. Now it looks like a prison. I think maybe the architect presented the design as a joke, but our principal liked it, so the architect just rolled with it. It never fails that when a school gets some money, they spend it on the staff and not the students. They cut out welding, machine shop, wood shop, and graphic design to buy a $1 million scoreboard for football. Honestly, there's way too much value put onto sports. Everything that was listed sounds way more valuable to learn than to be able to look at a scoreboard. Our mascot was a rocket, and a certain percentage of school construction money had to be spent on art. They spent $90,000 commissioning a giant rocket sculpture for the main field entrance. When it was unveiled, the artist had made one tiny change to the design. Instead of a pointy rocket tip, he'd gone with a rounded, mushroom tip. I mean, we thought it was hilarious, especially when they cut off the tip as their solution to the problem. But nobody liked it. I'm sorry. Did they circumcise the rocket? My school invested in 8-year-old Chromebooks that die in like 30 minutes. Again, not willing to invest in what the students actually need, and just going for the cheapest, crappiest thing they can find. I'm a teacher. My first year, the school leader bought a ping pong table for the lounge in an attempt to make the school more fun and relaxing. It simply became a surface to put copies on. You know what? This one sounds like it's more of a people around you situation. You guys could be having fun with it, but you're choosing not to. That's on you, not them. Besides, tables themselves can get pretty expensive. At least this one you can play with if you want. My son's elementary school PTO had an excess of funds. They decided to put it on a buddy bench. A buddy bench is a bench where you can sit on if you want a buddy. In theory, it sounded like a decent idea, except that it was placed in the hallway near the office and none of the kids wanted to be identified as someone who didn't have a friend. Nobody ever sits on it. I agree that the theory of the buddy bench is nice, but in practicality, it's probably not going to get used. This wasn't common knowledge, so I was the only one really ticked off by it, but I worked for Cisco Foods as a baker at a university, and the upper echelons of the administration had hired their own personal pastry chef to make these extravagant desserts for their meetings. This pastry chef was legit. She made absolutely amazing desserts of a wide variety every day, loaded them onto the cart, and with her baker's outfit and hat on would wheel it up to their daily administration meetings. Her salary was paid for by the students of the school, so that the administrators could dine on first-class pastries and desserts made from scratch each day. She was really good at her job and actually helped me improve in the bakery. But I was so mad that her job even existed simply to provide pastries to people who just sat around and decided how the school's money was spent. I obviously didn't make a stink about it to anyone because she was my friend, and I would never dream of putting her employment at risk. But I couldn't help feeling like her entire career was to make fat cats fatter, and it just boiled my blood. Okay, this is the first story that has genuinely ticked me off in how money is being spent. Just random TVs in the hallway that showed slideshows and crap. Tens of thousands of dollars when we could have just put up bulletin boards. My school had loads of TVs that I don't recall ever seeing turned on. Seems like there might be a trend in the TV area here. They installed cameras in nearly every inch of the school, not for student safety, but because the school board didn't trust the kids. My school was miles behind other high schools. Old textbooks and sometimes not enough textbooks. Computers were junk, no in-school programs. They spent every ounce of money on cameras and putting the rest in the school board's pockets. I really feel like these places need to be more strongly audited for stuff like this. My high school spent a bunch of money on this system to play popular songs for the last minute of passing time between classes. So we'd hear popular music and as a convenient way to know to get to your next class. Then they started playing Friday by Rebecca Black every Friday. Once. Then it was the only song on Fridays. Then it was the only song. Every day, 5 times a day. Thank God that was my senior year. No idea if they still do it. My God, I hope not. I'm sure the kids would be rioting. My school's mascot was a knight, and it was rumored that the school had the choice of installing a pool at the high school or to commission a large 25-foot-long metal sculpture of a knight on a horse, and to hang it from the ceiling in the back hallway. They opted for the horse. My guess on this one is they didn't want the long-term maintenance cost of the pool. They bought flags of all the states and put them around this caged-in area full of gravel. They caged in the gravel to stop students from walking across the gravel. They also bought flags in the school's color to line the fence around campus. Only thing is, we were in an area which can get very windy with 0 windshield, so those flags took a beating. By mid-year, they were an ugly frayed mess. My school spent $30,000 from 2 years of fundraising on an LED billboard about 10 feet off of a major road. It was so bright that it caused several accidents at night and had to be shut down about 8 months later because it was deemed a safety hazard. I hung out with several of the guys on the programming team and they figured out how to upload memes onto it. They couldn't figure out who did it, so no one got in trouble. In 2011, my college spent $32,000 to have Snooki come in as an inspirational speaker in some misguided attempt to connect with freshmen. Around the same time, there was a growing student-led movement to make the school more affordable. The student board revolted. People confronted her during her speech. It was a glorious mess. I think anyone who finds Snooki to be inspirational doesn't need to be encouraged. I went to a Catholic high school. Very few of the students were actually Catholic and went there because the local public school district was terrible. We won some contest or grant and the school said they would allow the students to pick what the money was spent on. The options were new flooring for the gym, renovate the courtyard next to the chapel into a prayer garden, or renovating the courtyard next to the cafeteria into an outdoor eating space. Most people voted for new gym floors, and some people voted for the outdoor eating space. I don't know of anyone who voted for the prayer garden. Guess what won? The prayer garden. People, even teachers, were furious, as the voting was clearly rigged to give us the appearance of a choice. If they really wanted a prayer garden, they should have just done the work without putting it to a vote. The funny thing about the prayer garden is that they actually made it nice and put in benches and plants and whatnot, but it was always locked and never used. Administration would often say during tours, "Oh, look at our lovely prayer garden for students. They voted for it." No, we didn't. Wait, the church used the money on themselves? No. i7 workstation laptops with Quadro GPUs, easily $2,500 each, for an elementary school, kindergarten through grade 6. Those machines were designed for CAD work and media production, but were instead solely used for web browsing and Microsoft Word. I don't have any idea why they bought them. Okay, so earlier we were talking about 8-year-old Chromebooks. This school has decided to go to the complete opposite end of the spectrum. These are laptops that should be available to university students who are studying like 3D rendering and things like that. This really goes to show that the people who decide where the money goes don't have any idea what they're doing. Laminated ID cards that everyone had to wear around their necks on some dorky lanyard. No one did it, so they made it punishable by detention. After that, half the students still didn't do it, and the detention hall became so overwhelmed that they began to make backlogs. After a few weeks, not wearing it gave you a detention 2 months from then. Eventually, detention became so backlogged that students started doing more severe transgressions, because they would have graduated before they could actually be forced to go to detention. After about a month of this, no one had to wear their ID cards at all anymore. They said it was for security purposes so no one could sneak into the school. The thing is, you could literally put anything in the lanyard and no one would check if it was your actual student ID card. I had a blank index card in mine and no one ever said anything to me. If someone actually wanted to sneak into the school, all they would need is a lanyard and no one would ever check if it's actually authentic or not. Like, what's the point? You're gonna sit there and enforce detention that aggressively because you need to flex your power over the students, but you're not gonna enforce the actual safety aspect that you're trying to argue that it's there for in the first place? Guys, this thread's really getting to me. Our school paid to cover a huge lot with cement just to have a ceremony on it announcing a new building. Then they tore it up 2 months later to start construction. My school fees went towards having nice cement for press pictures. What a joke. My school wasted so much money on plastic ID cards that you were supposed to scan into every room to assure you were there, and the IDs were also keys to get into the buildings. If you didn't have your card, you couldn't get in, and also got in-school suspension. It wasn't a bad system because you could easily take a photo of your ID to scan into rooms, but you'd have to bum a buddy to get into a building. But once there were internet problems, the whole system would shut down, and living in a rural wheat town, you could expect wind and rain and tornadoes and all of that fun stuff. My college spent $2,000 on a conference table. It made national headlines. This just reminds me of that scene from Community. When I went to college, the local NFL team paid for the school to go from a grass field to artificial turf. The school never said it was only half paid for by the team. My siblings had a whole year without paper, printers, no raises for staffs, cutting school programs, and they slashed the art budget. The football team still got new uniforms that year though. How are you going to put so much value on your football team? Come on, give the rest of the students what they need. My town got a brand new middle school, and somehow they spent $40,000 on a giant metal palm tree that they called the Learning Tree. One of the chair people essentially commissioned it from a relative. So many of us were ticked off. It didn't even have lights, and there was no way to clean it, so it just sat there like the giant waste of money it was collecting dust. Well, we liked it at first, not so much after. I followed a product development study and we got a fancy industry-grade laser cutter in our workplace. Then after a couple of people were able to use it, the teacher decided it needed cleaning. She proceeded to use a toothpick to shove it into the nozzle where the laser comes out, damaging the mirror inside the machine. We had this thing for less than a week. 2 years later I graduated, and as far as I know, that thing is still broken. Those lasers are incredibly expensive and powerful. What do you think was stuck in there that you could get out with a toothpick that the laser couldn't get out itself? When I started secondary school, we had a canteen with proper home-style food being served. Cooked fresh, real meat and vegetables, and good portion sizes. All the students loved it, and it was well used. The school decided to replace this with a fast food style setup with processed burgers and fries to try to appeal to the kids, and up the prices too. Within a month, nobody visited the canteen anymore. Practically every kid in the school started bringing food from home. It took 3 months till they changed everything back again. Massive expense for absolutely no reason. It was already very successful as it was. Why mess with a good thing? You just wanted to get cheaper food in there and charge more, didn't you? Teachers of Reddit, what's the funniest reason you've had to send someone to the principal's office? Not entirely the principal's office because they were kindergartners, but 2 boys turned off the lights in the bathroom, had their pants around their ankles, chasing each other around in the dark and peeing on each other. That was a weird one to explain to the parents. I work at a daycare and we couldn't figure out why the bathroom smelled like pee so bad even though it gets cleaned twice a day. After a few days, one of the teachers was tying a boy's shoes when she looked into the bathroom and saw another boy peeing directly into the floor drain. Apparently half the class was peeing down the drain instead of into the toilet. Unfortunately enough for young kids, peeing is funny, and they tend to go places with that. A kid dropped a folder full of Xeroxed copies of his hairy butt. Turns out he'd been taping them to people's lockers all over school. Maybe someone told him he had a nice butt and he felt obliged to share it with the rest of the world. My dad worked as a teacher in a school for misguided youth. On the first day, he wrote his name on the board as new teachers do, and when he turned his back towards the class, a kid had lit his desk on fire with hairspray and was just laughing. 3-foot-high flame no more than a foot away from him. I had a 6th grader who was, just to paint the picture, a human incarnation of Ralph Wiggum, who wanted to get out of class so desperately that first he raised his hand and said his ears were ringing and he needed to go to the nurse. Sorry kid, not falling for it. 20 seconds later, he raised his hand and said his tongue was burning and needed to go to the nurse. Not falling for it, Ralph. 10 seconds later, he had blurry vision. He was squishing his eyes with his hands. No dice, kid. And then, in the grand finale, he stands with a flourish and yells so loud that teachers all down the hall stuck their heads out into the hallway. My dong is bleeding! We all stood mouths agape until the one wise guy in the class adds, "And you want the nurse to look at it?" What did this kid have to get out of class so bad for that he felt the need to yell that to everybody? I didn't send him to the office, but one of my favorite moments was one time I was working with a small group while other students worked on independent stuff around the room. One student was working pretty close to me and obviously made a mistake because he exclaimed, "Crap!" except he didn't say crap. So I said, "Excuse me, Ty? What was that?" And he says, "Oh, I didn't say what you think I said, miss." And I said, "Oh, good. What did you say?" He says, "I said shit," obviously thinking very hard. And then just stared at me horrified. I was trying so hard not to laugh, but I just told him, "I thought that's what you said. Please don't use that language in my classroom." We were doing sketch comedy in 6th grade a few years back, and seeing as it was a nice day, we went outside to practice. From across the field, I see one of my students very clearly and aggressively trying to put his junk on a prone classmate. When I asked him, he said it was for his sketch, and he was playing a character named the Iron Teabag. The best was the follow-up text from my boss saying, "I had to Google what teabagging was before I met with the kid." Sounds like they may have an instant classic on their hands. I had a kid show up to band with a massive black adult toy instead of his clarinet, and he honestly thought I wouldn't notice. Dude, everybody's gonna notice. Not a teacher, but a classmate in my drafting class was sent to the dean for 3D rendering a massive dong. My teacher saw it, commended him for his work, and asked him to print it out. He then stapled it to a referral and sent him to the dean. Glorious. Not a teacher, but we had an older lady as a science substitute in 8th grade. It was a hot June day and the windows were open. We were on the 2nd floor. My friend told the sub when she walked in the classroom that Jimmy had fallen out the window. When the sub looked out the window, she saw Jimmy lying on the ground contorted, and she passed out. We never got a chance to explain to her that it was a joke. He had just laid down on the sidewalk under the window. The 2 boys got suspended and that sub never came back. You guys probably left her with a very traumatic memory. I'm a male 5th grade teacher. One of my boys yelled out right before the 3:15 bell rang, "Everybody be quiet, I have a boner." I was like, did he just say that? The way he said it made me giggle like a schoolgirl. Luckily, no one noticed me turn and bust out laughing. No one else really seemed to notice what he had said. The bell rang to go home and I call him over. I asked him if he knew what that was. Very innocently, he said no. Then I thought, oh great. I could tell by his face that he wasn't lying. So I said, well, it's when your private parts get hard. Right when I said that, he got this very scared look on his face and said, I promise I didn't know that. Like I said, I could tell he wasn't lying. I had a very hard time keeping a straight face. He said his friend had yelled that out once, so he thought he would. I told him he can't say those kinds of things, and he has to be careful what he says. He walked away very embarrassed. I laughed and laughed when he left the room. Kids at that age be saying some crazy things without really knowing what they're talking about. A girl got so drunk that she locked herself in the bathroom. We found her and obviously had to call her parents to come take her home. We kept telling her, listen, it's your dean and you have to unlock the door. She kept responding in the horrible drunk teenager voice, now you listen, I'm your dean. It was very difficult for us to not break down in laughter. Stupid kids. Getting drunk at school doesn't exactly sound like a good time. 2 of my 5th grade students were arguing on our way back to music class, so I went over to see why they were talking in line. I asked what was going on, and the first kid said that the other kid had called him gay. The second kid looked me straight in the eye and said, I didn't call him gay, I called him a B word. I sent them on their way to the principal's office and sarcastically thanked them for the extra paperwork. I worked in a computer-based classroom at one point where the students took many of their classes online. Some of them tried to cheat the system by copying and pasting short phrases into all the fill-in-the-blank or essay responses, hoping it'd glitch and pass them through. Quickly discovered one student had been pasting homo 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 into all his responses, which backfired pretty well in one particular instance. Question: copy the words that apply to you. Answer: homo homo homo. I hope you marked them all incorrect except for that one. First year of high school, I got sent to the principal's office by my near-retirement teacher for breaking dress code with my t-shirt that had drug references and paraphernalia on it. The funny part was when my principal had to explain to my teacher that Billabong is a legitimate clothing company name, and nothing more. In 6th grade, during a school mass, my buddies made up a thing called Wiener Whack Wednesday. Self-explanatory. Go around nut-tapping everyone. Well, our really hot teacher caught 2 kids doing it, and we had a whole lecture our next period. She asked if any of us knew anything about it, and all the girls told the teacher what was up. Every single guy in our class, 15 at the time, small Catholic school, got called to the office. We had to take turns talking to the principal and explaining that none of us were gay. Then she made us call our parents. I was really freaking out that my father would think I was gay. I love how this is going on and that's their concern. Not the fact that y'all are just whipping it out and smacking each other with it, as long as you're not gay. Not a teacher, but saw a kid stand up in Russian class to do a speech on a topic of World War II Russia. He decided to do the whole speech on why Hitler was the greatest. Now, our teacher was born in Russia, grew up during the Soviet Union, and came to Minnesota to teach. She was horrified. If you think that the United States hates Hitler and Nazis the most, you've not studied Russia and World War II. I was glad, because this knucklehead and his douchey friends ruined Russian class for 4 years. I had this obnoxious, smarmy, show-offy 5th grader. One day, he was up to his usual tomfoolery, and a girl silently got up, opened the classroom pencil sharpener, and dumped the shavings all over the kid. I had to send her to the office, but it was a truly satisfying moment for the whole class. Sounds like she was willing to take one for the team there. I was covering another teacher's class in a computer lab, and we have a program called Net Support that basically allows you to spy on the kids' computers. It also serves some legitimate instructional purposes, like allowing you to take control of a kid's computer so you can demonstrate things. Only this teacher never used it, so I don't think the kids knew it existed. I normally don't use it because I don't like the big brother vibe it gives off, but there was a kid being a totally obnoxious jerk. He was looking up stupid and distracting videos and laughing loudly about them and making obnoxious comments to show off in front of his friends. I could have blocked YouTube, but instead I took control of his computer. I started typing in kitten videos into YouTube, My Little Ponies, anything that I could think of that wouldn't be cool for him or his friends. Then, every time he started to freak out and insist to his friends that he wasn't doing it, I gave him back control, and shortly after would take it away again. Then finally, I made a little pop-up come up on his screen that said, "I'm watching you." I expected him to figure out what was going on, but I think he got freaked out instead. It never seemed to occur to him that it was me, so I gave him control back and he did his work quietly for the rest of class. We had this in the engineering building. I was a teacher's assistant and this kid was playing some flash game rather than doing whatever design project he was supposed to be doing. So I would wait until just as he was about to beat a level and ever so slightly screw him up. He didn't know I had this ability, so he was getting crazy frustrated. Seeing him get visibly frustrated, I went over to his desk and said something along the lines of, "I know the program can be hard to learn. Let me see what you've got so far and I'll help." Oh, the shame he had when he turned high screen and didn't even have SolidWorks or whatever open. If I were you, I would have just kept messing with him for the rest of the day. I went to a small Catholic high school in the Seattle area. We had monthly Mass in our gym, and every year around Easter we did the Stations of the Cross. Mass was always brutal, but the stations lasted 2.5 hours or so. Unreal. A little background, I couldn't burp until I was in my early 20s. I have no clue why, but any built-up gas had only one exit. Growing up, I farted to the point that people thought I had a medical condition. People even called me Fart Boy. Anyway, it was my senior year and we were headed to the dreaded Stations of the Cross Mass. My friends and I had let one rip in class a number of times, but never during Mass. We always talked about doing it, but never mustered the courage. I decided about a week before that this would be the day. The Mass was set up where the choir would sing before each station. I think there were 11 or something, and then the priest would ramble on about its significance. Each time the choir stopped, there would be about 10 seconds of complete silence. We're on the 5th station and the choir is finishing when all of a sudden, I unleashed a behemoth right as everything went silent. I was sitting on gym bleachers, which probably amplified the blast perfectly. I remember the guy in front of me inexplicably holding a yellow plastic screwdriver, and he dropped it. In shock or from the blast wave, we'll never know. My buddy and I proceeded to muffle our laughter for at least an hour until Mass ended. I've never tried to not laugh for that long before or since. Each time one of us would start to settle down, the other would release a cackle that started the whole process over again. We didn't even get in trouble. I'm sure the teachers thought it was an accident or never wanted to speak of it again. I'm laughing right now. One of my favorite memories. In high school, I got called into the principal's office. They put a screenshot of the Urban Dictionary entry for Cleveland Steamer in front of me and asked why I was looking at that. I laughed my butt off and said I was just doing some research and got sent back to class. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now, don't Google it. I used to work in a super strict school for kids who got kicked out of their regular schools. We had an assembly twice a day, morning and afternoon, that was extremely serious. Kids had to sit up straight with their hands in their laps, girls on one side and boys on the other. Totally silent, that kind of thing. Occasionally, when we were having behavior problems with entire groups, we'd make them sit in assembly for the remainder of that period or however long until they could get it together. There was a class of middle schoolers, naturally, who could not stop farting. They'd intentionally fart as loud as they could to be gross and disruptive, and it even evolved into them getting up out of their seats and farting on each other. This is hilarious to me now, but it got really old and really smelly. Anyway, one day it was happening so much throughout each class that we took them to assembly. I'm standing in front with one of the other teachers, and our principal was talking to them, except he was mad. So he's pacing back and forth, reaming these kids out, punching his fist into his hand, spit flying out of his mouth. His face is bright red. He's saying all this stuff about respect, and then he adds in, "Oh, and if you have to fart?" And he yelled the word fart with such venom and disdain that I just lost it right there in front of everyone. I could not stop laughing. I tried to play it off like a coughing fit or something, but I couldn't. I had to leave the room. Not a teacher, but the last time I was sent to the principal's office was over a live chicken in high school. The high school I went to used the 8-block schedule system. My last period teacher was afraid to the point of hilarity of birds. We had chickens at home, and since they were 4-H chickens, they were quite docile. I put one in a duffel bag one morning and then put it in the top shelf of my locker. They'll just fall asleep if it's dark. So once last period came, I put it in the bag. She was used to us all bringing bags in since it was last period, and when she got up to put the attendance slip on the door, I just took it out of the bag and put it in the middle of the room. Hilarity ensued, and I spent the next day playing Pokemon in suspension in the cafeteria. Is it really suspension if they just let you hang out and play Pokemon? The year was 1987. Second grade me decided to bring the Penthouse mags I found under my dad's bed to school. I found them the night before and thought up this whole plan. It was cold, so I slid them in between the pocket of my jacket before leaving in the morning. Shortly thereafter on the playground, I was showing my buddies all these beautiful women. Finally, get to class and found out my teacher was ill and was replaced by a sub. Thinking I had it made, I slid the mags under all my papers in my box and just went about my day. Just before lunch, the sub started going through boxes, searching for a folder for the neighboring teacher. That's when she screamed. The sub was waving the Penthouse at me while dragging me to the principal's office. To make things that much better, my sweet 80-year-old grandma was the one to pick me up. I made the mistake of leaving a 9th grader in my classroom when he missed the bus home. I had to go to a meeting and it was pouring rain, so I let him stay. I told him not to use the computers. The meeting was in the computer lab. We were learning how to see all of the students' computers on our own screens. The tech guy had us all pull up our first period classes on our monitors to test it out. No student should have been logged onto a computer at the time. All the screens should have been blank. I saw that a very conservative Jehovah's Witness teacher in the row ahead of me had one screen lit up on her multi-screen view. I watched as she clicked on the screen to see it larger. She gasped. She made a small whining sound. It was anime-style adult content. It was the screen of the student I had left alone in my room. The teacher quickly turned around, calling my name very loudly, and asked if the student was in my classroom. I told her he was. I got up and went to the phone at the back of the room. I called my classroom number. The student answered. I said, "You're doing something you shouldn't be right now, aren't you?" He said, yeah. I said, "I suggest you turn it off right now." I heard footsteps running across the floor and a slam. He returned to the phone. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. We'll talk about this later," I said. I hung up. What an unlucky kid. He chose to watch that on the wrong day at the wrong time. I don't know about unlucky. Sounds like he just made a really bad decision. There was a student with autism who lived in a very literal world. We'll call him T. You had to be very precise with your words, as T could not comprehend slang or figurative language. He had an issue with another student at recess the day prior. It was something minor about a basketball. Basically, T had a basketball and placed it under the goal and walked away. Another student grabbed it. T became angry and ultimately gave the ball to the other student rather begrudgingly. Apparently, T told his uncle, and the uncle's response was, "I'd have made that kid eat a poop sandwich." Well, T made a quick stop by the litter box before coming to school. He also wrote a note to the other kids saying, "I get the ball today, you can have this poop sandwich." It wasn't a gesture he viewed as inappropriate. He actually thought the poop sandwich was a viable option for the other student. I had to send him to the office, but my God did I laugh. Even his mom laughed before apologizing. The principal still has the note in the office 2 years later. I'm sure the kid receiving the sandwich probably didn't find it as funny. I'm not a teacher, but my mother is. A kid in her class asked if she had any kids. At the time, I was my mother's only child. She mentioned me and the kid goes, "Well, what school does he go to?" And of course, my mom answers without hesitation. The kid goes, "Good, I'm gonna blow it up." Instantly expelled. Yeah, I don't think there's any other course of action to deal with something like that. I didn't even send the kid. I was too amused. I asked one of my students to come smash a giant spider on my desk. Being 9 years old, he walked up with an impressive swagger, trying to show all his friends how brave he was. He took one look at it and whispered, "Oh, F word." I was the only person who heard him, so I just stifled my laughter and told him I wouldn't write him up if he killed it. He did and was the talk of the lounge at lunch. I teach at a university, so I didn't send him to the principal, just out of class. I once told a student to leave class because he never brought his textbook and constantly played on his phone. So after 2 classes of this, I told him to get out because he was distracting other students. This kid freaked out, yelling and cursing at me. Keep in mind, I'm a 5'2" female and this kid's about 6 feet. The rest of the class is like, "What the heck?" And I stared him down and said, "Get the F out of my classroom!" Kid picked up his books and left. From that point on, anytime someone screwed up in class, the rest of the class would shout, "Get out of my classroom!" at them. They all thought it was hysterical that I cowed this giant. I mean, you gotta let them know who's boss early on. Teachers of Reddit, what's the most shocking or surprising thing you've seen going on in your classrooms? A kid stuck a craft pipe cleaner in an electrical socket. Cue a flash, a yelp, and blue fuzz everywhere. Socket and cover were both burned black and didn't get replaced for 3 years. The student was an 8th grader. I knew a kid who put a paperclip in an electrical socket and thought wrapping it in paper would protect him from the shock. In grade 10, the idiot had to go to the hospital because it screwed up his heartbeat. No matter what age you are, I think you should know you don't mess with electrical sockets. Back when I was in school, we had 3 of the 6 ambulance teams in the whole county called out to the school because one sunny day, someone passed the fad around that kids should hyperventilate and have someone push on their chests until they passed out. If I remember correctly, some 14 students had to be checked out and 1 taken to the hospital. I was a long-term sub for an art teacher that taught in the cafeteria. She warned me about a kinder kiddo named Romeo that had many issues, and told me to basically never turn my back on the class while he was in it. I didn't really pay too much attention to it because I was a genius substitute. But anywho, I turned around to grab something from the art cart and I heard a gasp from the other 22 kiddos. I turned around and he was standing on the lunch table with his pants down, shirt pulled up and yelling, "Who wants to kiss it? My name's Romeo!" I was mortified. I'd hate to know where the kid learned that behavior. My dad is a teacher, and this is his favorite story. As a PhD student, he was teaching American history at a small high school. As he was lecturing, he noticed an odd smell and an enormous football player walking toward him from the back of the class. The football player hands my dad a note which says, "I have just pooped myself." Not a word is said. My dad simply nods to the student, and the student walks quietly out of the room to handle the matter. My dad kept the note for around 20 years, and would occasionally ponder the grammar of pooping oneself instead of just pooping oneself without the extra poop. There was a strange craze of crapping in books and leaving them in the library. Somehow, nobody was ever caught. One time when we were watching a movie in class, I saw the girl next to me touching herself. Let's just say my 16-year-old body full of hormones had good material for the next 6 months. What movie were you watching? One day, our teacher didn't show up to class, and neither did her substitute. Some kid gave a 50-minute lecture on pimpology during that time. Sounds like the kid saw an opportunity and took it. I went to a small music school where basically everyone smoked all day. One day during midterm review, our audio professor yelled at the whole class for being under the influence for about 20 minutes. Nobody knew what to do. A very large, peculiar boy by the name of Thomas was caught pleasuring himself by sticking his stuff into the pages of books and thrusting. Might I mention typical Tom, as he was referred to, was a junior in high school. Surely you have better ways of taking care of that. A student pooped in the attic and threw it all over the walls during a break, then played it off as if it wasn't him and invited people to see. He's still in school. Not from my time as a teacher, but still relevant. Way back when I was a youth, there was a guy in science class. Let's call him Dan. Now, Dan was one of those kids who, for one reason or another, failed at all challenges involving common sense. He also liked to crush up chalk and snort it during science class. About the only thing Dan was good for was soccer. He played in the school team and was regarded as our best striker. Anyway, Dan's stupidity came to a head one day during an experiment set up by one of our chemistry teachers. She had a large container of chlorine gas she'd procured prior to the lesson at the front of the class. She explained what she was going to do, what the gas was, and ended her explanation with a stern, "Do not breathe this in." Then she got distracted by something and had to leave the room for a moment. She was gone no more than a second when Dan stood, dashed to the front of the class, opened the container, and took a long, deep, hearty snort of chlorine gas. The airborne ambulance made remarkably good time getting to the school, and somehow saved Dan's life, but it was a while before he came back to school, and he was a changed kid. He couldn't play football anymore. His lungs were permanently damaged, and even running short distances left him gasping for air. Not sure what became of Dan, but he taught me a valuable lesson about chlorine gas. Apparently it was used as a weapon during World War I. I can see why. I hate to say it, but this is Darwinism at its finest. In my classroom, we kept a television screen which can be connected to wirelessly. One day I was setting up a DVD about World War II, and it came up in the top right, Billy's iPhone connected. It then proceeded to play the infamous Paris Hilton tape. The kid was utterly shocked and later admitted it was a mistake. He was watching it in the back of the room and somehow connected it to the TV. Oh, poor Billy. I'm a high school teacher in American Samoa, a US territory. Tattooing is a huge cultural thing. A student I know, P, comes to me before school and asks if he can hang out in my room at lunch. Sure thing, I tell him. It's pretty common for kids to grab their lunch and hang out in a teacher's room. Come lunchtime, L comes to my room and asks if P has shown up. They're supposed to meet in my room at lunch. He hasn't shown up, so she sits and waits for him. Soon after, P comes in carrying his backpack and lunch. I'm sitting at my desk eating my lunch. Suddenly, I hear a zzzz sound. As soon as I heard the sound, I recognize it. I turn my head. L is sitting at a desk with one of her sleeves rolled all the way up. P is holding a tattoo gun in his hand a mere inch away from L's arm. What are you two doing? P does tattoos, miss. He's gonna do something for me on my arm. You can't get a tat in my classroom, L. P, put away your equipment. You can't give a tat in my room or at school for that matter. Tattooing being a cultural thing or not, I feel like that's a pretty brave move. I can't claim credit for this story, but it's a goodie that allegedly happened in my buddy's 4th or 5th grade class. So this 4th grader, that will henceforth be known as Conrad, apparently went on a family trip to China and came back with a pencil decorated with intricate dragon design that he absolutely adored. Like during class, he would take it out of his pencil bag and put it on his desk just to look at and admire, but never used or even sharpened it. One day, when Conrad left the room to use the bathroom or something, the kid sitting on his right, who we'll call Jim, picked up the dragon pencil, stuck it in a pencil sharpener, and ground that beautiful work of art until it was just an eraser with a stub, with a tiny amount of dragon design still visible. When Conrad comes back into the room, he seats himself and looks forward, noticing what's become of his most prized possession, but doesn't say a word. He then grabs the sharpened pencil that he'd been using to write, screams, and stabs it through the hand of the kid sitting to his left, Bill, incorrectly assuming he was the culprit. Needless to say, Conrad didn't come back to class the next day, or ever again. Not sure what's good with Bill's hand. Eesh, Bill was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I'll be honest, I was rooting for Conrad though. I taught choir for several years to 7th and 8th graders. I've seen some stuff, man. One day I'm assisting another music teacher in a very big school, and things are going pretty smooth. I see this one kid looking kind of gray. Then he sways a bit and starts turning green. I know where this color changing act is headed, so I signal for the kid to head to the trash can. He made it to the can, but then threw up so violently that he sprayed it all over the walls and the double doors. I thought the sweet little sopranos that sat in that part of the room were either going to puke themselves or pass out. I had a hard time not laughing at them. So I send the kid to the nurse and go look for a custodian. I can't find one anywhere, so I have the secretary page one. Nobody shows up. I go looking again and find the head guy, old retired sailor, hiding in the kitchen doing something so he wouldn't have to clean up the puke. I tell him it's an emergency. The room was about 80 degrees as the HVAC was crap, and head to the room to help out with crowd control. Did I mention there were about 80 kids in the room? The custodian finally shows up and starts to mop the puke up and wipe down the walls. I walk over near him and say something like, "He really made a mess, huh?" The old salty dog replies in full voice, "Gosh darn effing kids making messes all over the gosh darn place. I hate this effing place." The sweet little sopranos were horrified. I had to walk away so I didn't lose it. Poor guy sounds like he's having a really bad day. I'm not a teacher, but my ex-girlfriend was. She had just started teaching kindergarten, and these two kids had a full-blown relationship. They would hold hands, kiss, and get angry when other kids started hollering at their partner. Weirded me the heck out when she told me. Kids start early these days. I was kind of a crazy kid in middle school, so I had this one friend. Let's call him Eric. The both of us were inseparable. Well, one day during study hall, we were both goofing off and had to be separated, so they put Eric in the quiet room. At the time, I thought it would be a neat idea to crawl through this air vent type thingy that was in the wall at knee level, which led into the quiet room right by Eric's feet. I quietly knocked out the other end and grabbed Eric by the feet, which made him scream. This, of course, got the attention of the teacher, who quickly ran over and grabbed my legs trying to pull me out of the air vent. Well, I didn't want to go peacefully, so I kept holding on to Eric's feet while the teacher kept pulling on my legs. It turned into a tug of war between my teacher and I, which I eventually won by crawling through the other end into the quiet room. I'm surprised I turned out normal. Hey, we all mess around when we're kids. Not a teacher, but one of the only memories I have from grade 1 was us sitting on the floor in the morning semicircle while our teacher went on about school stuff. There were about 3 rows to the semicircle with me sitting on the outside corner on a chair, so I could see everyone sitting down quite easily. We had this weird kid that just wasn't right. He'd belt out the national anthem as loud and off-key as possible every morning, even with everyone looking at him and not singing. So naturally, he decides that this semicircle is the perfect moment to whip it out and spit all over it. Then he spits on his fingers and starts Somehow, I'm the only kid that sees it. Not even the kids beside him. I sat there stunned for like 30 seconds wondering if anyone else was witnessing this, and why no one's doing anything, before the teacher noticed and snapped her fingers at him. He got the message. Props to her for not making a scene though. Kids are messed up. Not a teacher, but two kids would grope each other during class. The teacher never said anything, but it was pretty obvious, so she had to have noticed. The teacher probably just wanted to pretend it wasn't happening. My sister is a teacher. A girl had been disappearing for about 30 minutes a day in her homeroom period. After some investigation, it turns out the girl had been scheduling and giving blowies during that time. She didn't even make money off the deal either. She just gave them out of the goodness of her heart. In middle school, they had a detention in the study hall room, but the detention kids were put into separate rooms in the back with a tiny little window. There was a kid that pleasured himself in there, and the study hall teacher went in there and saw the kids' aftermath all over the wall. She yelled and told all of us to go into the hall. His phone was still out with adult content pulled up on it. The kid ended up being homeschooled after the incident, and I've only ever seen him once since graduation. A lot of the stories I'm hearing here seem to involve young kids needing to learn when to control themselves. This didn't actually happen on school property, but it was pretty shocking nonetheless. Two boys were assigned to be partners for a project in school. For the sake of clarity, let's call one boy John and the other boy Fappy. They were working on the project together at John's parents' home. While there, unbeknownst to John, Fappy stole a key to the house. It seems that Fappy was into some kinky, albeit tame by today's standards, stuff. And so it was quite surprising to John's family when Fappy was found wearing John's mom's underwear and touching himself in John's parents' bed. Now, I'm not one to actually believe that a story such that one hears in the schoolyard is necessarily true. However, it just so happens that my parents were friends with John's parents. After hearing the story at school, I asked my mom about it, and she confirmed it. Surprising to no one, the story caught on like wildfire, and Fappy's reputation for being a cross-dressing, self-touching criminal preceded him for the remainder of his time at that high school. That's not really the shocking part though. What actually surprised me about the whole incident was how insensitive the teachers, particularly the gym teachers, were to Fappy. They were just as ruthless as the students with their name calling and such. I would go so far as to even say that they incited much of the abuse toward him, and even encouraged the other students to ostracize him. As a teacher, you'd think you'd want to bring up that incident regarding that kid as little as possible. It's really just cruel to keep it going. One day, I was walking into class when I heard kids yelling and screaming like maniacs. Turns out it was a smoke bomb brought from Mexico that left the room smoky and smelling like urine. We got our backpacks searched, but nothing was found. The kid then confessed after the backpack search, so he and the one who gave it to him left with an officer. I haven't seen them since. The classic stink bomb. I remember one of those going off in high school. My school tried to do an experiment and tried to put all the male below average grade students and delinquents into one English class taught by a female teacher. It did not go well for her. When she stepped out to use the bathroom, we emptied all the bookshelf and her desk and threw them out the window. Kids hid behind the blinds of the windows and slept. One kid missed his bus sleeping through the next 2 other periods. We made dominoes out of the books. She actually joined us for this one. Another time when she stepped out, we stood books up and threw knives and scissors at them to see if they would stick. Learned how to throw knives that day. We were on a second floor that partially looked out onto the roof of the first floor. Kids would often just leave and enter through the windows. Not sure why. Our school hall pass was just a red laminate that had hall pass crudely written on it. We broke open a locked drawer to find a lamination machine and made everyone hall passes. But the weirdest of all, we all passed and actually did fairly well in her class. I actually took a copy of The Day No Pigs Would Die home because I liked it so much. Sounds like you had a good teacher for not only hanging in there, but actually managing to capture your attention along the way. I went to an all-boys secondary school and was 15 at the time this happened. Our class of 25 boys were coming back on a field trip in a packed minivan doing around 60 miles per hour on the motorway. The guy in the back right seat decides to announce that he's going to start pleasuring himself, and then stands up and goes through with it. There were 25 male adolescents on that bus. They weren't as shocked as the old couple in the next lane. Oh, that poor old couple. I'll never forget the look on that old woman's face as she peered into a school bus of children and proceeds to get an eye full of wang. The boy was expelled, rightfully so. In grade 4, my friends and I decided to protest in our class during lunch period because the school replaced the chip machine with healthy snacks. At first, it was no big deal. 5 or 6 of us just beginning to chant at our lunch monitor. But by lunch recess, it exploded into a full-force riot protest. We had hundreds of kids across 3 campuses in a colossal hive. It was one of my proudest moments, but it quickly turned into a nightmare when the teachers fought back. They tried to hurdle us up and gave an insane amount of detentions. I was one of the lucky few to escape before the genocide, but I still think to this day about those I lost that fateful day. Eventually, the school caved and offered semi-healthy snacks like Crispers and pretzels. I hope later generations appreciate the sacrifice we made, and I pray they live a more peaceful time than we did. I think our poster's blown this up into some grand battle in his head, but in actuality, most of these kids probably just wanted a reason to get out of class. We had a half-hour session with our mixed ability home class to start the day at my school, then all split up to go to lessons by ability streams for the rest of the day. I was in top groups for most things, but in this first hour, I generally ended up at the back of the room with the slower kids, and we started playing cards or poker dice. Never for money, though. After this had been going on for a few weeks, I was caught in a quiet corner by the teacher, and thought I'd get in trouble for leading them on. Instead, she just said how it was really good for them to concentrate for that length of time on something, especially something requiring maths and patterns, but that if any of the other staff came in, to hide it all quickly. It's always nice when you think you're going to get in trouble and you just get a general thumbs up from the teacher. Not a teacher, but also a student. At the age of 12 to 13, we had math class with a temporary teacher. Let's call the teacher A. In our class, we had the typical students who did stupid things without thinking. Let's call them B1 and B2. Out of nowhere, while everyone solved their math problems and A was walking around helping the students, B1 and B2 threw their pens and accidentally dropped it to different locations. That way, they could roam free in the classroom. When they went to pick up their pens, they'd also whip out their junk, doing the helicopter and rubbing their junk on different furniture. It became almost like a game for them. The one who got caught first lost. How's that fun for you? It's just weird and you're creeping out everybody around you. Not me, but my parents are both teachers. My dad teaches drama and directs a school play each year. I can remember on the first night of one of these shows a few years back, he came back and said that whilst he was checking backstage during one of the set changes, he found a kid peeing into a bottle because he forgot to go to the toilet before his part. It was really funny but shocking because this is a really posh school. Hey, I don't care who you are, everybody's gotta pee. We had our study hall sign-in in the same room that kids would serve in-school suspensions. Well, one day I walked into a kid pleasuring himself and finishing all over the floor. He then zipped up his pants and walked out to a very stunned professor. Come on, guys, control yourselves! I'm not a teacher, but this happened to my friend. We were sitting in the back of the classroom, and being freshmen in the South, some of us picked up dipping tobacco. Not me though. So my friend decided he's gonna put a dip in class while the teacher was giving a lesson. If that wasn't dumb enough, a while later, the teacher's done with the lesson and we're all just chit-chatting. But I notice he's sitting in his seat to himself. Moments later, he starts gagging and coughing. But no one really paid attention. We were pretty loud. I go up to him and check on him, and he said he threw up the dip. It was in the back corner of the classroom, so it wasn't noticeable. I glance over his desk to see there's tobacco-ridden puke with red juice all over it. I ask him what the heck that was. Apparently he didn't want to be caught with the dip, so he tried to make it seem like he threw up the juice instead. However, when he noticed that wasn't going to work either, he just left it. After I processed how stupid he was, the bell rang and we all left. Throw up still on the floor. I mean, in your situation, I guess you guys just call that one a win, right? Mechanics of Reddit, what vehicles will you absolutely not buy or drive due to what you've seen at work? Never buy a car the first year they redesign or remodel it. Always run into issues that they fix the second or third year they release it. This is probably good advice for more than just vehicles. Do not buy Ford Fiesta or Focus automatics from 2012 to 2016. Their power steering is messed up. Their transmission is messed up. Both had a class action lawsuit out. Not a mechanic and not in the US. Currently living in Mexico. Graveyards in Mexico are filled with people dead from car crashes in the Nissan Suru. A complete piece of crap with wheels that has 0 stars in safety. Parts are cheap and gas mileage is good, but they're just coffins with wheels. Just this year, Nissan Mexico is going to cease its production. 3 years after the Latin NCAP made the security tests and scored 0 in everything. Even with all these facts, it's the most bought and stolen car in Mexico. Gen 1 Porsche Cayenne. They're getting cheap enough for most people to afford, but the cost of maintenance is ridiculous. That goes with any premium manufacturer. You always gotta keep the maintenance cost in mind. You might get something dirt cheap with a really nice badge and name on it, but it's gonna cost you a lot to fix it up come time. 2012 to 2016 Ford Focus. The clutches go constantly, to the point where they made it a service bulletin, and it continues to happen after the warranty is up. Yeesh, we're only this far in and we've gotten 2 red flags on the Ford Focus. That's not a good sign. When I was looking to buy a used car, I found a Land Rover for $2,000. My father, who was a mechanic, said to me, yeah, it'd look great on the back of a tow truck. My dad's a mechanic and he always says Volkswagen New Beetles. My first car was a Volkswagen New Beetle. Needed a new radiator? Guess the whole front end is coming off, again. I had to work on one of those, but the problem I had with it was that it was the largest feeling car I'd ever driven. Yes, it's a tiny thing and I knew the front bumper was only like 3 feet in front of me, but it felt like the car's a mile long. I worked for a major Japanese auto designer you're all familiar with. We used to do an event where we took a vehicle apart piece by piece, every single piece, inspecting, weighing, measuring, and comparing them to our parts. We did this for every design model and with every competitor. Never once was any Chrysler vehicle mentioned, not even in comparison documents. It was the ultimate disrespect. They weren't even considered a competitor, not even for some portion of their vehicles. I saw a lot of different cars broken down and close up. I have a lot of good things to say about competitors, but Chrysler Dodge Jeep is not one of them. You go. Although it's pushed to start, just make sure to keep your back straight when pushing as to not injure yourself. Well, that's not the greatest vote of confidence, is it? Subarus are great cars, except for the Tribeca. At work, we call them turds. I don't know if I've ever even heard of the Tribeca. Chrysler Sebring, specifically the V6. Alright, that's a couple warnings for Chrysler owners now. We're keeping tallies here. Any new model automatic Focus. The manual transmission are fine, but the automatics are the most trash pieces of crap. We've had multiple come in with less than 5K miles with transmission leaks. I've not driven one that doesn't shudder when you accelerate from a stop. My god, the Focus is getting destroyed out there. I just bought a used Suzuki Swift for cheap, only to find that Suzuki has pulled it out of North America entirely. We've already had issues with it, so this is gonna go great. Always look into that kind of thing before buying a car. You need to know you're gonna be able to reliably get it fixed. My mechanic tells me never to touch an out-of-warranty BMW. He owns 2, and says the electronic gremlins have driven him insane, and are virtually unfixable by a non-dealer mechanic, requiring things like circuit board replacements, proprietary software readers, and things like that. That's why my friend keeps his 1995 BMW. It's one of the last ones you can work on yourself. Of course, that means at this stage in its life he's working on it a lot, and there's not much he can do about the body rusting. Mercedes-Benz are gonna put my kid through college. Every part is artificially inflated, and I have a theory that every job takes some messed up specialty tool just so you have to be at the dealer or a German shop. Also, any Cadillac with the North Star V8, just heck no. Also Dodge. New ones are garbage and old ones will run for 400K, but the body is gonna rust off the frame by 100. The Reliant Robin. Never trust a car with 3 wheels. Never! If you guys haven't seen the Top Gear clip of this car, seriously, go check that out after you're done with this video. The Reliant Robin. I have a love-hate relationship with my old Land Rover Discovery 1. More than capable, but stupid crap broke. What made me get rid of it? The freaking door handles. Couldn't get dealer replacements and used ones were going for over $300 a set. Made me say screw it and I junked it. Alright, that's Land Rovers coming in a couple times now. The Pontiac Sunfire. I own two and you have to take the front wheel off to do an oil change. Worst design choice ever. When I lived in Japan, I had a van that required me to remove the ashtray to check the oil. I thought it was a joke when I was reading the instructions, but nope. Other than that, ran like a champ. It was a Mazda Bongo Friendly Turbo Diesel. That's a pretty cool name for a van. Can we get stuff like that in North America? I've come across a few wrecks involving smart cars. The best thing I can say about them is that they aren't hard for the fire department to pry open and get the body out. I had to drive a smart car for a tech job in Michigan. One of the clients was being lazy and the owner asked me to drop off a laptop on the way back to the office, so I ended up in a different lane than I would normally be in. I stopped at a busy intersection and I look into my rear view mirror and notice a car is coming up pretty quickly, 40 miles per hour. No way he saw the light. Older guy, not sure if he was distracted or not. He slams directly into me. Strangely, I wasn't scared so much as angry when I realized what was about to happen. He slams into my back and I figure it's probably the end of me. I get pushed into the guy in front of me and I can feel an ache, but I walk out pretty much unscathed. The back of the car looked impeccable. The front that got pushed into the other car was smashed to heck. No airbag or anything. Thanks, seatbelt. It started leaking fluids and the car itself was totaled, but I got out okay. Still debating if that was lucky or not, but a question for different subreddits. The most concerning part about that is that the airbag didn't deploy. Isn't that like the one thing that's supposed to happen? Smart cars do look like they would crumple pretty easily though. A lot of comments say Dodge. What is it about Dodge? Is it all Dodge vehicles? I thought their trucks were supposed to be pretty reliable. I have a Dodge Neon and it runs like a piece of crap, but there seems to be little that anyone can actually do to kill it, and it's really cheap to fix. Yeah, but they're really cheap to fix for a reason. They're built really cheap. That's why it runs like crap. My immediate family all drive Honda. We're all good friends with the owner of a local dealership. We've all had multiple models hit 200K plus without issues. I've had my Accord for 11 years and have about 210 miles on it. And last week was my most expensive repair. Replace the battery lead cables. $200 said and done. We've driven Pilots, Accords, Odysseys, Civics, not an issue. I'll never buy a car that isn't a Honda or Acura. Opposite end of the spectrum, a lot of Japanese makes are very reliable. Honda is always a top contender because they tend to be very affordable, and as our original poster pointed out, repairs are typically pretty cheap as well. I own a frame and suspension shop. My answer, Dodge. Alright, Chrysler Dodge Jeep is getting crushed out there. To be fair, Jeeps haven't been called out in particular yet, but they are all the same manufacturer. Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon. They may look nice, some people think so, but they're uncomfortable as heck to drive in, extremely expensive to fix and upkeep, and tend to break fairly often. Not a mechanic, but from my experience, screw any Taurus made around the year 2000. They'll run forever, but you don't want them to. The windshields leak and the insulation under the carpet is made out of some recycled fiber that smells disgusting when it gets wet. Son of a Mazda mechanic here. If you live in the north or anywhere it gets remotely cold, do not buy an RX-8. It won't work 3 to 4 months out of the year and will need constant expensive care in the other months. Any US Navy submarine. Talk about overpriced. And parts? Good luck. We don't have any money. Oh, it's a nuclear part? Never mind about us being broke. Here's $400 for that 2-inch O-ring. May as well order 12 of them while you're at it. Source: nuclear mechanic in the US Navy. You know, the thread is open to vehicles, so this qualifies. Dodge Grand Caravan, 60,000 miles on it, and I've replaced the rear brakes 5 times, and it already has a misfire. Mark another one for Dodge. First and foremost, no Chrysler products, ever. No Chrysler, no Jeep, no Dodge. They're trash vehicles made by a trash company out of trash parts. The diesel engines in the trucks are the only thing worth a damn, and they don't make them. The old Jeep Inline 6 was great too, but everything they put it in would fall apart around it. I know most people reading this aren't in the market for one, but Land Rovers are hot garbage. Expect screwy electrical issues that have your mechanic chasing his tail for the life of the vehicle. Anything German is going to be too expensive to fix, with the exception being Volkswagen. And even if they can rack up the miles on the odometer, you'll have tons of stupid problems from cheap manufacturing. Alright, someone start digging the grave for Chrysler. Ran a bumper-to-bumper, all makes and models shop in Las Vegas on the edge of Summerlin, our rich area. To start, I'd like to specifically point out the Isuzu Rodeo. I won't even work on one. I turn them away at the door. Haven't found one without more repairs than it's worth. BMWs can be a monster. They're just super expensive for parts and not always as well engineered as you'd be led to believe. Mercedes, Mitsubishi, and Audi also have expensive parts. Dodge, as has been said, has really dropped the ball for the last few decades. I drive a 70s in decent shape. When it comes to GM and Ford cars, their upper tier is alright, but the mid and lower tiers are junk. Buy a Nissan or Toyota, please. Even a Honda. GM and Ford are truck dealers, and they know it. Lastly, I can specifically point out the GM Cadillac Northstar engine found in 90s and 2000s models. It puts Dodge to shame. Leaks from every seal, and the starter motor, an otherwise common part, is located in the valley of the engine, literally the center of the motor, under the lower intake manifold. I think the book time is like 6 or 8 hours. Most starters are close to 1 hour labor. The 90s models even have a liquid-cooled alternator. You know, like the new age liquid-cooled PCs. Let's run our water into our electrics. Except car engines get much hotter, vibrate non-stop, and are expected to go further than your PC. Lot of insight from that user. Again though, a lot of repeat names too. Claims adjuster here. I've seen more than a handful of Hondas, Civics, and Accords hit a deer full speed and still be able to drive them to a safe location. Solid. I love how in a thread where we're supposed to be talking crap about crappy cars, we're actually hearing some upvotes for Honda. My mechanic told me never to buy a Volkswagen, so I bought an Audi. The turbo failed at 100K. For those of you who aren't aware, Volkswagen owns Audi. Everyone laughed when I bought my Kia, but I don't see it listed here. Knock on wood. Kia got their crap together in the middle of 2006. There's actually a 2006 model of the Kia Optima and then a much better 2006.5 model. From that model onward, they've been decent cars. The running joke about old Kia was they were so cheap you could buy two, one to drive and one to take parts from. A cheap Escort or a brown Probe. We're still talking about cars, right? Franchise garage technician / state vehicle inspector here. Any Cadillac with the Northstar V8 engine. It has a feature that shuts cylinders off at low load to save fuel but makes a lot of noise when active. For miles per gallon gain that aren't really impressive today. Something like 20-25 city highway. It's also notorious for leaking oil. It's been engineered to be able to run for up to 50 miles with no oil. Because designing an oilless engine is easier than fixing all the leaks in a Northstar. I've never seen one not leaking out of somewhere. Next, about German luxury. They're not inherently bad cars, but maintenance is more expensive than most folk expect. So people buy used thinking they're a steal secondhand, and then a year later they've got no-name Chinese tires, squeaky brakes, and 5 warnings lit up on the dash because their 2002 Taurus only took 2 $30 oil changes every year. Why would this be different? Honestly though, I think the drivers put me off more than anything. Caddy and especially Nissan just attract a certain kind of person. That car's either spotless and new or the grossest pit of human goo you'll ever sit in. Crumbs in between everywhere, dank smelling ashtrays in the cup holders, all the surfaces are sticky, and weird dark spots in the cloth seats where a person would normally go. Nasty stuff. We've had a few references to this specific engine from Cadillac now. There may be some of you that want to look into that. Of course, if you have one, you might already be aware. How about medics of Reddit? Because Volvo, yes. Ford Explorers, no. Dodge Neons, also no. Honda, also yes. I'm also kind of amazed that more people don't shoulder tap their firefighter, medic, or emergency room doctor friends for car purchasing advice. I was in a really bad accident while I was driving a Honda Accord. The car didn't make it, but the police and firefighters were pretty surprised that I did. Honda for the win. Guys, if we're learning anything from this thread, it's buy a Honda. Motorcycles are my thing. I wouldn't touch a Ducati or any modern BMW. Build quality is abysmal. On another note, all cars will crumble to dust before my old 2002 Yaris does. Japanese import. Without a doubt, the best little crap box of a car on the face of the earth. When the apocalypse comes, the cockroaches will be all that's left alive and they'll be driving that 2002 Yaris. I'm imagining a Mad Max future where everyone drives around in a Yaris. Used car salesman here, so I'll list in order from worst. Number 1, any Rover. You know it's bad when an extended warranty costs $15K. 2, most Audis over $50K. 3, anything Chrysler. 4, Ford economy cars, these being Escapes, Fiestas, and Fusions. Motors are usually okay, but electrical can be hit or miss. Every car is different, so don't take my word for it. Just get a warranty if you can. Number 5, Nissan Leafs. I could keep going, but yeah. I want to say that's the first Nissan we've seen, but maybe not. Anyhow, another hit on Chrysler and cheap Fords and Rovers. Eesh. Don't buy a 2013 Jetta. It has general mechanical issues, and if you crash it, it's screwed. Trust me. After owning a Jeep, never own a Jeep. At least not as your primary car, and have plenty of funds to fix it. Something I've picked up on over the years if you want to buy a car. I'm sure some will disagree, but it's just a general guideline. 1974 and earlier, buy American. Ford 200 inline 6 will outlast us all and decent mileage to boot. 1975 to 1995, buy German. More rigorous maintenance but built to last forever. 1995 plus, Japanese. Cheap, reliable, no frills cars. 2010 plus, Japanese and Korean. Top of the food chain at the moment. More advice recommending to buy Asian. I don't know guys, not looking like a whole lot of other options out there. My Hummer H3 is the worst car on the planet. Since hitting 110K, I've had to do a $700 to $900 repair every 2 months or so. The car is paid off, but with these repairs, I might as well be having a car payment. Dude, look up recalls and get them fixed. My boss's H3 went up in flames and burned to the ground because there was a recall he didn't know about. Fire started under the glove box. This could just be punishment for owning a Hummer. Mechanic here. To be fair and honest, there isn't a single brand or model to pinpoint. It's all about how you take care of it. I've seen $200,000 cars that I wouldn't take a leak on to put out a fire, and I've seen $2,000 vehicles that are apocalypse proof. Some of my friends and coworkers spend so much money on repairing their cars or buying new ones, just to neglect them and get to the same, oh, it's a piece of crap mentality. Meanwhile, my derelict in appearance 18-year-old truck, I've been the owner for the last 8, soldiers on with just basic service and a few fixes and upgrades here and there. That is an important factor at the end of the day. A lot of it comes down to the owner. You have to take care of your car. Glad to see my Chevrolet Silverado surviving this thread just fine. Dodge trucks, not so much. Maybe you haven't been paying attention, but at the same time, a lot of the comments we've had have said that the trucks are better, so at least you have that going for you. This may be an unpopular opinion, but I'll say V6 Hondas and Acuras with 5-speed automatics. The transmission is fine in 4-cylinder cars, but apparently has a fluid passage design flaw that can become further restricted with debris, causing overheating and failure of one or more clutch packs. The issue seems to manifest itself due to the extra torque in V6 applications. I believe it only affects models years 2002 to 2006. There's a reason that the 03 Accord Coupe V6 is a third the price of a similar 4-cylinder model. The V6 might be on its second or third transmission. First mark against Honda and Acuras here, but to be fair, we're talking about 20-year-old cars here, so I don't think we need to worry about that too much. Everyone throws out a turd now and then. People who grew up with strict parents, what was their most unreasonable rule? I was called at a friend's house at 11 p.m. at night because I left 2 t-shirts slung over the chair of my room versus hanging them in my closet. I had to go back to my house and then I was grounded for a week. Upon getting home, my mother had gone through my entire room and tossed every item out of my dresser. She claimed they were messily put in the dresser. Fun stuff. My mom was very strict about the rating of movies and video games. One year for Christmas, a relative gave me a copy of Star Wars Shadows of the Empire for the Nintendo 64. It was a T for teen rated game and I wouldn't be turning 13 for another 4 weeks. My mom had my dad drive me to Toys R Us to return the game. We walked into the store and over to the games counter and he had me pick out an E for everyone rated game. We proceeded to the checkout and as we went to the car, he handed me not only the new game, but the game we were supposed to have returned to buy it as well, and told me not to let her catch me playing it. My mom's curfew was 7 p.m. and her brother's was 12 a.m. Her brother was about 2 years younger than her, and my granddaddy's logic was that girls get themselves into more trouble than boys. My poor mother only ever attended church functions for fun until she graduated from high school. My stepmom decided that I was using too much shampoo. She would get a little medicine cup before my shower and pour the designated amount into it. It wasn't ever enough because I had hair down to my butt. I also wasn't allowed to use conditioner. When I was in 5th grade, I wrote some stuff in my diary about masturbating, and a month later, my mom went through all my stuff. She would randomly go into my room and tear it apart, and I'd always get in trouble for something. And then I'd have to clean up the mess and be grounded for whatever amount she felt like that day. So anyway, when she found that diary entry, she picks me up from school and won't talk to me. I get home, my door was removed from my room, that diary entry was taped on the wall, and I was threatened with a belt if I didn't answer all her invasive questions. It was pretty messed up. Wow, yeah, this one just takes invasion of privacy to a whole new level. I was/am not allowed to do the following: use the washing machine, wash the dishes, pull the weeds, vacuum outside of my room. I must ask to use the vacuum. I can't cook a meal. I can't have the remote. I get instructed on how to use the microwave that I've been using for years. And if I ask where we're going, I get told out, and I have to dress in jeans, a shirt, and running shoes no matter how hot because he doesn't like shorts, and no jacket no matter how cold. This one sounds like borderline child abuse. We could not listen to music with guitars in it. I'll never forget the day my brother was listening to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath and my father took the radio and threw it through the window. Spend my childhood listening to Richard Marx and Michael Bolton. Thanks, Dad. We couldn't go sledding during the winter, or any other season obviously, because my mom was a neat freak and didn't want to get snow slogged into the garage. So no snow playing of any kind, really. Never built a snowman. Did get to go sledding though when I was an adult, and it's pretty great. All of our clothes in our closet had to be arranged by color, descending in order by shade. So for example, midnight blue at one end of the blue section and Tar Heel blue at the other. And there was a system in place for colors too. So if the yellows were by the purples, for example, there'd be hell to pay. No shoes on in the house under any circumstances. Was super uncomfortable when my brother's friend who had prosthetic legs and always had shoes on came over and didn't take his shoes off. Mom got really mad and confronted him. No Legos or puzzles allowed as they make messes and look like disorder, and I love puzzles as an adult, one of my favorite hobbies. 30 minutes of internet time a day, and 99% of the time that was supervised, as in mom looking over my shoulder and commenting on conversations. We had web TV, and when they weren't home, they would literally lock the keyboard in a toolbox. My sis and I could never have friends over because the house is a mess, and no amount of cleaning satisfied mom because the real reason was she wanted to be able to fight with my dad at will. I had to write essays on TV shows that I wanted to watch in order to have them unblocked by the parental controls. I remember writing a riveting piece on the educational and cultural benefit of Disney's That's So Raven. Also, I wasn't allowed to watch PG-13 movies even after turning 13. Wasn't allowed to rest my head on my hand with my elbow on any table while there was also food on that table. If my parents found out I was going too fast in my car, small town, so other parents would snitch on me pretty regularly for going over 10, I had to pay my parents speeding tickets. Also, they would make me pay for the whole family's phone bill if I texted a boy. By the time I moved out at 17, I had given them well over $1,000 in punishment money earned at the Sonic Drive-In. I was not allowed to talk to boys. One Christmas Eve day, I was doing last-minute shopping in the downtown of our little town. I ran into 2 male friends from my German class and we talked for several minutes and wished each other a Merry Christmas. Oh, I was 15 at the time. My older sister drove by and saw me and told my parents I was hanging out with boys. When I walked in the house, both of my parents were waiting and the yelling began. Some Christmas Eve. I was from a large family and discipline was very strict. If myself or one of my siblings broke one of the major rules, my parents would hold a truth session. All the children would be brought to my dad's study where the guilty party would be given an opportunity to confess. If nobody came forward, we would be hit in turn in order of ascending age. The eldest four were hit with a sewer rod, while in deference to their age, the youngest ones would get a whack of a bamboo stick. A sewer rod is basically a 4-foot long flexible rubber rod around an inch thick with a metal cap. It would leave the most remarkable welts. Horrendous things, really. Anyway, this would continue until someone admitted their guilt. At that point, they would receive the blows that everyone else had received to that point. So that was awful. I fully acknowledge that. I'm under no illusions. However, that wasn't the actual unreasonableness. No, the unreasonable part was that the person who caused the truth session didn't always receive the accrued punishment owed for having their siblings beaten. Sometimes they could just be let go, making their siblings hate them for causing pain to them. There'd be no explanation. The study door would be opened and we'd all be told to leave. That meant you could be rewarded for holding out and avoiding the punishment you'd definitely get if you admitted it at the beginning. My parents now tell fun stories about how when I was a child and I'd done something wrong, I'd always begin with, "Let me tell you my story." Ha ha, they chortle at my childish phrasing, while I recall the terror that such an approach was meant to stave off. There were a lot, but the most ridiculous one to me was that they didn't want me volunteering during high school. I was visiting the elderly and they said it was too dangerous to be around strangers like that, and the time was taking away from my studies. Most extracurriculars I wanted to do they had a huge problem with, but it didn't hit me how absurd it was until it was about senior citizens. My father was very, very strict. I wasn't allowed to have alone time with my mother. He beat the crap out of me constantly. But the oddest thing that still bugs me to this day is that he would burn all my things as punishment. And I get it, seeing my toys and valuables burning sucked, and I probably learned some lessons. But he not only burned toys, he would burn everything. Every year or so for school, we would go and buy me new school clothes and shoes. He would burn those, like sometimes days after he bought them. At 8 years old, I remember thinking, you now have to buy me more clothes. But that wasn't the point, I suppose. He once took me to the Palace of Auburn Hills in Detroit to see the Globetrotters one year, and during the night, he bought me a Globetrotters basketball and jersey. We had a really fun night. The very next day, I had left something on the floor in my room, and his punishment, among other things, was to burn the basketball and jersey he bought for like $150 less than 24 hours earlier. It just never made sense to me. My friends would joke about it all throughout middle and high school. I was not allowed to wear makeup or shave until 16. My mom was controlling about food. Everything was kept track of. I had to be in marching band in order to get my permit. I had a job, but even if I worked a second shift, which I did, and came home at 11, I would have to clear the plates from the table for the dinner that they ate. If I asked to hang out with a friend in the presence of said friend, the answer was automatically no. I was only allowed to do things if the friend or their parent was paying for it. The straw that broke the camel's back and ultimately made me move out at 16 was that I had to live like a boarder. Showers cost $5. A load of laundry was $1 for washer, $1 for dryer. Telephone time, 25 cents per minute. Wow, I feel like that's really taking things to an extreme. The parents must have been flat broke themselves and in desperate need of money or something. No trends or passing fads. Pokemon, banned. Barbies, banned. Beanie Babies, banned. PlayStation/Game Boys, banned. Anything particularly fashionable or popular, regardless of actual merit, was met with derision and we'd be mocked for even suggesting interest. We were achingly frumpy kids with interests in cultural references or lack thereof that isolated us from our peers, and they wondered why each of us were bullied. My parents were pretty slack, but my best friend's parents were so strict. She would escape to my house for freedom. It's 12th grade and it's prom. Her parents allowed her to go to prom, but said she wasn't allowed to dance. We all went to prom and had fun dancing, until she saw her parents standing at the back watching. She then moved out for university. After her first year, she came home to work for the summer. She'd been on her own for a year and supporting herself, and her parents gave her a 9 p.m. curfew. She spent a lot of time at my house that summer. She was married by the next summer and didn't have to deal with it. Individuality was almost a cardinal sin in my parents' house. You wear what they like. You eat what they like. You do what they like. You do not, under any circumstances, act like a human being with hopes, dreams, and opinions. My mom was insanely controlling about food. Weird rules were in place, like 1 slice of lunch meat per sandwich. No one but her was allowed to cook. She made 1 giant batch of spaghetti or something and we'd have leftovers for days, so she only had to make dinner twice a week. She didn't work or anything, just didn't like cooking every day. Breakfast was cold cereal and you'd only be allowed a small bowl with just enough milk to moisten it. Occasionally she'd bake something called corn toasties, which was simply cornbread baked in a sheet pan. She'd cut them into squares and fill the freezer with them, and we could have one of those for breakfast as an alternative. Once, when I was 14, I bought a pack of hot dogs at the store, snuck them home, and lit the grill. I was almost done cooking them when she came out screaming about fire hazards and swatted the plate out of my hand. She'd been making spaghetti. What an ungrateful little bastard I was. So then she orders a pizza for the rest of my family, wraps individual servings of spaghetti in freezer paper and puts them away. She tells me that I will be eating nothing else until it's all gone. Took about 2 months to choke it all down. Went without eating a lot of days. I was also grounded for over a year. But I sure learned a lot about consequences. I wasn't allowed to go out. Like, ever. If I was going to hang out with someone, it had to be on the weekend, planned at least a week ahead, and my parents had to meet their parents and drive me there. They would come get me before the sun went down. Not a rule, but if I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night or was reading because I couldn't sleep, my mom would come screaming up the stairs, "Why are you up?" and sometimes hit me. I wasn't allowed to close the door in my room. There's more, but that's all I can think of right now. Mostly my mother would just yell about everything. Not my parents, but my high school friend had very strict parents. This was shortly after 9/11 and the anthrax scare. It was Halloween evening and a group of us were supposed to head out and light fireworks around the neighborhood. Well, my friend wasn't allowed to come out that night because his mom was worried about terrorists bombing our country with anthrax. We live in Canada. Was forced to drop out of high school in the 5th grade because my grandmother believed that most people have no souls and were demon-possessed. She said that the world was unsafe to roam freely because Satan was trying to corrupt God's children. This led to a very sheltered life and very silly things like having to pray over every individual item that entered the house. Food, toiletries, dish soap, you name it. I'd get woken up at 2 a.m. to be screamed at for over 3 hours over something God had told her that I did wrong. So yeah, I guess the most unreasonable rule I grew up with was not being allowed to leave the house. Not my parents, but my best friend's parents were insanely strict growing up. When we were preteens and sleepovers were all the rage, if we wanted to have one, we literally lived on the same street, it's a 2-minute walk between our parents' houses, we had to plan it at least a month in advance, if not more. Even then, for whatever reason, her parents would only agree to them rarely. So really, we only get to have like 2 or 3 a year. One time I started getting sick at school on a Friday and we'd planned a sleepover ages ago as usual for that night. I was feeling absolutely awful but tried my best to stay at school because obviously if I went home sick, the sleepover would be called off. Made it to lunch and then the teacher called me over and said I was white as a ghost and burning up and had to go home. My best friend and I were devastated. Sad day. My dad was a narcissist. Biggest rule in the house was not to make any noise around him. If he was home, the whole house got quiet and tense. Even my mom used to eat her cereal in the bedroom because she'd get in trouble for chewing crunchy food. Now she's long rid of him and married to a way better guy, but she still apologizes for eating crackers. In the 1970s, my extremely conservative Mormon mother would take the masks out from grocery store plastic Halloween costumes, those wretched ones with thin elastic string to hold them on, and widen the eye holes with scissors as much as she could without destroying the mask. When we asked why this was necessary, she informed us that in our church, we don't like masks because it was a group of masked men who murdered Brother Joseph. So we want to be able to see your face clearly enough, even if your Halloween mask's on. Totally pointless and ineffectual dogmatism, except that whatever that is was never any kind of LDS dogma. I was interested in learning about Wicca because I was young and in high school, early 2000s, when Harry Potter was still happening and all that stuff. My mom and stepdad found out by reading an email I sent to my cousin. It was the summer and they freaked out. Took everything. I couldn't read, I couldn't listen to music, I couldn't watch TV or movies with the family, I couldn't hang out with friends, couldn't talk to my cousin anymore. Basically, anything that might bring me pleasure was taken. They made me do chores all day, would go on family outings without me, and soon I became a shell of a person. I started having a lot of bad thoughts that made me really scared, and I decided not to go through with. So I turned myself off. They hated it. They weren't getting a rise out of me anymore. Anything they said to me. Since their narcissism relied on a victim, I wasn't a source anymore, so they extended my grounding even further. They could have told me to go pick up dog poop in the backyard with my teeth, and I wouldn't have flinched. My stepdad's family, just as terrible, would come over and belittle me as well. I was told to smile. So I'd humor them and flash an empty smile for a second and return to my blank expression I had to find solace in. All this was to save me from going to hell. The only thing that saved me that summer was my visitation with my dad. My mom and stepdad tried to paint him in a bad light, like he was the abusive one. Even as a kid, I knew my dad didn't make me feel as bad and empty as they did. I eventually got through it. Years later, about 4 years now, I ended up working at a job unexpectedly with a girl I used to play with in the neighborhood. I always wondered why she stopped showing up. When I wasn't home or in another part of the house, she came to the door and asked to play. One of my parents opened the door and told her I didn't want to play with her anymore. I always wondered why she never hung out with me or talked to me. Even finding this out in a more recent term, I cried and apologized to her. I could have had a great friendship with a lot of people, but they just wanted to alienate and control me. Unfortunately, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I don't talk to them anymore, but I still live in the same city as them, and I have a lot of social anxiety because of that. One of my roommates exhibits the same kind of behavior my parents were so kind as to bestow upon me. It makes things difficult to handle. I just want people to be happy and live in a healthy environment. It's so messed up that the biggest monsters in the world are the people closest to you. I had to be home by the time the streetlight that was at our house turned on. If I didn't make it, I'd get grounded. Turned out, years later, I found out that my parents had control of the one light in our yard with a switch in the utility room. It wasn't solar controlled to turn on when the sun went down like the other street lamps in the neighborhood. I have too many to name growing up in an Asian household, but the one that was the most embarrassing was I was not allowed to shave my legs or armpits, and I hit puberty at an early age. So I had really hairy armpits and legs and was forced to wear shorts to gym class. I was so embarrassed about my legs that I would wear shorts with opaque pantyhose, which just made the whole situation worse, and was the butt of many jokes in middle school. My mom has apologized thousands of times since, but it still brings back crappy memories. I had a ton. I think the most unreasonable was that we, my siblings and I, weren't allowed to know where we were going during car rides. If we'd ask, we were told business and figure out we were going to the store or whatever only after we arrived at our destination. This lasted until I moved out. Another was asking for permission to use the bathroom every time. This didn't last as long. Okay, I think this is the second time this has come up about not being allowed to ask where you're going during a car ride. Guys, can you let us know in the comments? Is this a common thing? I've never heard of this before. A friend of mine wasn't allowed to wear shorts to school unless it was already over 80 degrees when she had to leave. School started at 7:40 a.m., so this almost never happened, even on days where it reached over 90 midday. The school didn't even have air conditioning. My dad was incredibly strict while I was growing up. Two of his stupidest rules were, number one, my brother and I had a bedtime of 9 p.m. until I was a senior in high school. Number two, bedtime was so strict that we weren't allowed to get up to use the bathroom after 9 p.m. And number three, he made us have a babysitter until I was 14 years old. Of course, he denies ever doing any of these things to this day. Another very stupid rule was no locked doors in the house. Ever. As in, locking the bathroom door wasn't allowed, and my dad proclaimed that he should be allowed to come into any room in his house anytime he wanted. He would often try to come into mine and my brother's rooms while we were changing or something, so I got into the habit of changing my clothes very quickly and only when our dad was upstairs or something. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.